The unknown doesn't stay silent. Paranormal M listens to the whispers and tells their stories. Subscribe, hit that like button if you feel like it. And let's let the darkness unfold. The Ghost in the Stairs. When I was still a student, I once heard a Japanese ghost story. It made hospitals feel different ever since then. It was about a night guard in a quiet little clinic. A young man had just been hired to cover the night shift. His task sounded easy enough. Walk around the building, then pick up the phone if it rang, and then rest until dawn. The clinic had a simple security system. There was a soft green light, and it meant everything was normal. But if the light turned red, someone was inside. One night, the young man leaned back in the chair, half asleep. That's when a flicker caught his eye. The lamp, it glowed red. Then almost immediately, it returned to green. He exhaled, told himself it was probably just some faulty wiring. But minutes later, red again. And this time it didn't change back. Heart pounding, he called the director. The man on the other end spoke calmly, promising to come right away. Relieved, the guard glanced out the window and spotted the familiar figure walking toward the rear entrance. The security system beeped softly, then powered down, just like when the director used his key. As soon as he stepped into the hallway, something changed. A foul, wet stench seeped through the air, thick enough to choke on. Then came the noise. It was coming from below the stairs. Not a song, not really quite a prayer, but a sound that wavered between both things. And then it showed itself. Skin pale like spoiled milk, long limbs too long, joints bending in ways they shouldn't bend. It swayed its body as it climbed the stairs, humming that strange, broken chant. Halfway up, the guard's phone suddenly rang. The figure froze. Slowly, its head twisted toward him, followed by its entire body, turning like a broken doll. Its clouded eyes rolled, and then a grin stretched across his face. It laughed. It lunged. He slammed the glass door shut just in time. The smell grew unbearable. Thuds hammered the door. Head, elbows, knees. Every hit made the glass groan. And then silence. Shaking, he forced open the window and jumped. Bone shattered, arms, legs, fractured of the skull, but he lived. Days later in the hospital, a nurse whispered something that froze his blood colder than the night itself. Even when unconscious, every night his eyes opened, his mouth moved, and he sang, The Woman by the Gate. I want to share something strange that happened to me just past midnight. An old classmate of mine happened to be passing by my house. Sent me a message right away. He said he'd noticed someone sitting quietly on a low stone bench right outside my yard, the front gate wide open as if it had been waiting for someone. From where I was standing inside, the shadows blurred everything. Switched on the porch light and opened the door. By then, the figure was no longer sitting there. It had moved just outside the gate, standing half in the light, half in the dark. I stepped out while I was still on the phone. I was trying to see more clearly. That's when I saw her. A woman in a pale blue dress, standing not too far from me. Well, she wandered slowly up and down the street, The soft sound of her sandals, they were scraping on the pavement. Every few steps, she'd stop and tilt her head toward the house ahead, as if listening for something. She moved gently, but there was something oddly deliberate about the way she did it. After a moment, she drifted closer. She must have realized I was talking about her with my friend. She lifted her head and said in a low, trembling voice, "Don't be scared of me." And then she added, "I'm just waiting. Someone promised they'd come." Her voice seemed to crack on the last words, like she was holding back tears. I told her she couldn't come any nearer, but gave me this faint, almost sad smile and whispered, "But the gate was open." Taking one step closer, slowly, I shook my head and said firmly, "No, it was not. Please keep your distance." She didn't argue. She only murmured, "Don't look at me like that." She turned away and walked down the road with the same calm, strange stillness she had when I first saw her. And I can still picture her perfectly. Shoulder-length black hair, light blue dress fluttering the night breeze, a small clutch bag clutched in both hands. And about the gate, I'm certain I locked it. It has a heavy bolt on the left side. Always takes a good push to open. But that night, it had been shoved ajar and the iron latch scraped out of place. Not long after I went back inside, my friend called again. From where he lives, a bit further down the street, he said she kept pacing up and down for at least another 20 minutes. And then, just like that, she was gone. The shadow that followed us. So many strange things unfolded through the years, and at first, thought it was something tied to the house that we lived in. But when we moved, the paranormal came with us, and this might be a long one. I'll start with a memory I've shared elsewhere before. I was born in Manchester in the late 80s. My mom was always a deeply spiritual person. She read tarot, used pendulums, and burned incense in the kitchen like it was an everyday ritual. We lived in a small flat built sometime in the early 70s. Odd things were just part of daily life. Toys being found in weird places, knocks on walls when no one was there, and once, what I can only describe as a perfect voice imitation. When I was little, I didn't understand that. Imaginary friends were supposed to be visible only to the one imagining them. But as long as I can remember, I always saw a little girl with black hair cut in a neat bob, pale as chalk, polka-dot dress. They'd be playing silently in the hallway. I thought she was someone from another floor. I never did recognize her from school. Back then in the early 90s, most neighbors kept their doors unlocked during the day. I remember going downstairs one afternoon and seeing the girl standing in the doorway. She stared at me blankly, turned, walked away. She never spoke, not even once. My mom often whispered with her friends about my older sister's imaginary friend. She was 5 years older than me and had started kind of acting out, which wasn't like her. She'd blame it on Dottie, the name she gave the girl. One night, I'm heading to the bathroom. I had one of those cheap sliding doors that never shut properly. I heard my sister whispering inside, and curious, I peeked through the gap. She was kneeling on the floor, talking softly to someone. And in the bathtub, sitting perfectly still, was the girl. Same dress, same hair. My sister spoke as if they were having a full conversation, but the girl said nothing. Later that night, I asked her about it. She was shocked, and I could see Dottie. Years passed. We moved away. Then one day as we sat in her kitchen, she was scolding her young daughter over something. Her little girl looked straight at her, shrugged, and said, "Daddy told me to do it." The Imitation. Christmas '97. My mom was fussing with the cassette player. My stepdad was at work. Two of my siblings out with friends. My sister went upstairs to the bathroom. About half a minute later, my mom laughed and said, "That was quick, didn't even flush." We all turned to the doorway. My sister was standing there smiling, and then the toilet flushed upstairs. She faded like steam. And moments later, the real sister walked in, confused why Mom stared at her like she'd seen a ghost. And my sister looks exactly like her grandmother, who died in 1989. Moved a few months after that. The cards, the cups, and the signs. Mom's tarot cards had a habit of being knocked off the table by seemingly nothing. And once she left them laid out on a velvet mat. She was gone maybe 2 minutes. When she returned, beneath one card was a small, neat pile of what looked like dry skin flakes. No one else had been in that room. Another time, every teacup hanging from the hooks beneath a cupboard shattered, one after another like a chain reaction. I'd always sensed things others didn't, and sometimes I just knew things I shouldn't. Like that night in August of 1997, when I jolted awake in panic, shaking my sister and crying that Princess Diana is dying. She turned on the news to prove me wrong, but within minutes, the breaking news confirmed the accident. The healer's words. A few months later, Mom took me to a spiritualist center. A Reiki healer came over after the session, saying that she was drawn to me. When she placed her hands near me, the air felt electric. She told me I was a bridge, that energy on the other side used mine like a doorway. She told me to wear obsidian for protection, and I didn't for years, but I have now for 2 decades. The plain dream. The night before 9/11, I'm staying at my eldest brother's place. He says I shook him awake, asking why anyone would fly a plane into a building. And I don't even remember this, but the next day when the news came, he dropped his coffee and stared at me. The house with footsteps. As a teen, I stayed with my dad in a quiet town. The house felt wrong from the start. One night after midnight, while chatting online, my dog stiffened and whimpered. I touched her head to calm her, and then a violent bang came from upstairs. She growled, another bang. Footsteps thundered down the staircase so hard they knocked a pair of decorative muskets from the wall. They stopped at the door. The handle shook violently, and the wood cracked. No one was there. That night, even my online friend watching through the webcam was terrified. Still a bridge. I don't always see or hear things anymore, but I can still feel them. A friend has a child spirit in her house that hates the vacuum cleaner. I told her about it before she mentioned it, and she laughed and said, "Yeah, I know." And about 14 years ago, I woke to find an elderly South Asian man in traditional clothes standing beside my bed, looking lovingly at my sleeping husband. I didn't feel fear, only warmth. And months later in India, I saw his face again, in a photograph on a shelf. My husband's late grandfather. So, am I haunted, or am I just what the healer said, a bridge? Maybe a doorway. I'm a bridge. Whispers Beyond the Pines. I'm watching ghost stories from Reddit on YouTube, and I figured I should finally share my own. This happened somewhere around 2008 or 2009. And back in 2006, I moved into an old rental house on the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio. It was a strange place, a single home left standing in what used to be a quiet neighborhood, now wrapped by parking lots and offices and a 24-hour diner. The old owner, from what I was told, had refused to sell the land. The house itself was tiny, maybe 900 square feet. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, slanted wooden floors, a crawl space that smelled like wet leaves. Oddly, it had its own private well, even though the whole block had access to city water. Gave the place a damp, heavy feeling that never quite went away. A few months in, I invited a couple of close friends to move in. So there were 4 of us total, 2 couples sharing this little creaky house. It was fun at first, and I was in my early 20s. We were broke but happy, throwing weekend hangouts and playing music way too loud. I wasn't the first to notice it. My roommate's girlfriend was. We started talking more and more about the figures that would zip past the hallway or stand by the kitchen doorway. Shadowy shapes that never seemed fully solid. Outside the house were thick pine trees that blocked out most of the city light. And at night, the place felt like it was alone in the woods. At first, it was only flickers. I'd be on my computer late with my headphones on, playing some online game. When I'd catch a shadow just at the edge of my vision, I'd hear whispering, faint, like a radio between stations. If I paused the music, it would stop too. I started talking to the empty air. "I can hear you, just leave me alone, okay?" Then I'd turn the music back on, and it would start again. I always had that feeling that someone was watching, especially when the others weren't home. And one night, somebody joked about using a Ouija board, and I shut that down fast. My aunt had one when I was 13, and what happened after that is something I still don't like to talk about, to be honest. So I tried something different. I started reading books about hauntings and energy and people who claimed to be sensitive to spirits. I started meditating, trying to see if the feeling was real or just my nerves. And it turns out my roommate's girlfriend was quietly doing the same thing. We didn't even know until weeks later. During my meditations, I sensed 2 clear presences. A young boy, maybe 7 or 8, and a tall man in a long old-fashioned coat. The man didn't feel threatening, more like he was guarding the boy. I figured maybe I was just losing it, so I said to the air, "If I'm wrong, nothing will happen, but if I'm right, give me something I can't ignore." A week later, my workplace threw its big winter party. I worked for a quirky little online shop that sold collectibles and weird pop culture memorabilia. Because the owners were eccentric, they always invited local quote-unquote personalities like tattoo artists and actors from indie horror films, that kind of crowd. After too many cocktails, my coworker dragged me over to a woman she wanted me to embarrass myself in front of. She was a horror actress, dressed like she stepped out of a gothic movie. But instead of laughing at me, she stared at me like she already knew my face. Then she said without even blinking, "Ethan's going to be fine." I froze. Ethan was my roommate. She shouldn't have known that name. Then softly she added, "But the boy in your house is lost." Every bit of warmth left my body. She mentioned one more thing, I can't remember clearly, something about the woods behind the property. We ended up talking for nearly half an hour. She told me she practiced spiritual work, that she'd felt something when she shook my hand. She showed me a tattoo of her zodiac sign, which is a Scorpio. Damn straight. I met her again at another party a year later. Still won't share her name, but I'll never forget her face. That night I came home tipsy and passed out fast. Around 3 a.m. I woke to my girlfriend shaking me and cops in the hallway. Blue lights were flashing outside. Ethan had been caught in a sting operation. I didn't know he'd been dealing small amounts of pills. He'd driven across the state line that night and was arrested in our driveway. He did eventually walk free from, or rather, with probation. The actress had said that he'd be fine somehow, and she'd been right. The boy's spirit, though, took longer. Eventually contacted a local medium, the kind older woman who did a small ceremony at the crawl space. After that, the whispers stopped. The house felt lighter. I hadn't realized how heavy it felt until it wasn't anymore. I don't seek that other world anymore. Once was enough. When it's my time to cross, I'll take that step, but not before. Shout out to my fellow weird Scorpios. We're misunderstood, okay? The man who came back from the ground. I work in an assisted living center. It's for people living with dementia. And this morning, I sat in a room with one of our residents. She's still very early into her dementia, clear and often very sharp. She told me quite calmly that she wanted to share something she'd never told anyone outside her family, and I said okay. She leaned back in her chair, fingers nervously twisting the hem of her blanket, and said, "My second husband is dead, sort of." I asked her what she meant. She shook her head slowly. "I have to start from the beginning." What followed was a long, winding story about 40 minutes, full of old photographs and newspaper clippings. She kept these all in a small box underneath her bed, and a voice that didn't waver once. She told me about 2 husbands before him, both who had hurt her, one through fists, the other through betrayal. Then she came to the last one. He had been kind to her at first. He brought her roses every Sunday. Then cancer came, and with it a storm of grief she said she couldn't stop. One winter evening, in what she called the quietest night of the year, he shot himself. He didn't die right away, and they kept him in the hospital for weeks, but eventually he passed. There was a funeral and people wept, and the cemetery took him. Everything seemed final. Until 3 nights later. She told me she woke up at 3:17 to the sound of knocking, not on the door, but on the side of the house, near the cellar window. She swore to me, her voice trembling now, that when she opened the door, he was standing there, mud caked to his hands, suit still torn, eyes like wet glass. She said she let him in. Apparently, he didn't speak. He walked straight downstairs to the basement, the place where he had tried to end his life. She followed, but couldn't bring herself to touch him. She called her sister the next morning, but no one believed her. They thought it was grief or early confusion. For weeks, she said she brought food and water to the basement door. Plates disappeared, cups came back empty, and sometimes she heard humming, an old war song he used to sing when they cooked together. Her daughter eventually forced her into assisted living. "You're imagining it," she said, but then the daughter moved into the house. A month later, she told her mother in a whisper, "I saw him too." She locked the basement door. No one went down after that. No one spoke of it again. As she told me this, tears filled her eyes. "He must be gone by now," she said softly. "Or maybe he's still waiting." My hands were cold. I've worked here for 6 years. I sat with dozens of residents telling me stories, some real, some lost in fog, but this one was different. She's early in her dementia. She's never told me anything strange before. She told it in perfect sequence, like reading it from a book that she lived. And I don't believe in ghosts, and I'm not religious, but that night I whispered a prayer on my drive home. The man who came back from the ground. I work in an assisted living center. It's for people living with dementia. And this morning, I sat in a room with one of her residents. She's still very early into her dementia, clear and often very sharp. She told me quite calmly that she wanted to share something she'd never told anyone outside her family, and I said okay. She leaned back in her chair, fingers nervously twisting the hem of her blanket, and said, "My second husband is dead, sort of." I asked her what she meant. She shook her head slowly. "I have to start from the beginning." What followed was a long, winding story about 40 minutes, full of old photographs and newspaper clippings. She kept these all in a small box underneath her bed, and a voice that didn't waver once. She told me about 2 husbands before him, both who had hurt her, one through fists, the other through betrayal. Then she came to the last one. He had been kind to her at first. He brought her roses every Sunday. Then cancer came, and with it a storm of grief she said she couldn't stop. One winter evening, in what she called the quietest night of the year, he shot himself. He didn't die right away. They kept him in the hospital for weeks, but eventually he passed. There was a funeral and people wept, and the cemetery took him. Everything seemed final. Until 3 nights later. She told me she woke up at 3:17 to the sound of knocking, not on the door but on the side of the house, near the cellar window. She swore to me, her voice trembling now, that when she opened the door he was standing there, mud caked to his hands, suit still torn, eyes like wet glass. She said she let him in. Apparently, he didn't speak. He walked straight downstairs to the basement, the place where he had tried to end his life. She followed, but couldn't bring herself to touch him. She called her sister the next morning, but no one believed her. They thought it was grief or early confusion. For weeks, she said, she brought food and water to the basement door. Plates disappeared, cups came back empty, and sometimes she heard humming, an old war song he used to sing when they cooked together. Her daughter eventually forced her into assisted living. "You're imagining it," she said, but then the daughter moved into the house. A month later, she told her mother in a whisper, "I saw him too." She locked the basement door. No one went down after that. No one spoke of it again. As she told me this, tears filled her eyes. "He must be gone by now," she said softly. "Or maybe he's still waiting." My hands were cold. I've worked here for 6 years. I sat with dozens of residents telling me stories, some real, some lost in fog, but this one was different. She's early in her dementia. She's never told me anything strange before. She told it in perfect sequence, like reading it from a book that she lived. And I don't believe in ghosts, and I'm not religious, but that night I whispered a prayer on my drive home. Whispers in the dim light. I'd never had a single brush with anything paranormal before I met my boyfriend. We crossed paths in late summer 2024. And not even 3 months later, found myself moving into his place. And yeah, it was fast, but it felt natural. We clicked, we shared bills, we shared space, and everything felt easy. At least at first. Oh boy. He didn't tell me about what he believed was a quote-unquote attachment until well after I moved in. One night during our first real argument, something strange happened. We were sitting in the living room, my voice maybe a little bit louder than usual, when suddenly from the kitchen a heavy wooden chair toppled over with a thud. No breeze, no one near it. sent a cold rush going through me. My boyfriend didn't look shocked, and instead he sighed and said, "Yeah, it does that sometimes." I froze and said, "It?" He explained almost casually that sometimes things fell or would move when emotions were tense, sometimes for no reason at all. That night's fight had actually started over something kind of stupid. Me and my best friend had gone to a thrift shop earlier that day. We bought an old Ouija board, thought it'd be funny. He didn't find it funny. I remember rolling my eyes and saying, "It's just a board, it's not real." I couldn't have been more wrong. We ended up getting rid of the board that same night after he finally told me about his history. His first encounter. When he was about 12, his family dog passed away. He was a quiet kid, the kind who spent hours in the woods behind his house digging and building forts. And one day, while wandering around, he found a warped, dirt-stained Ouija board lying face down near a hollow tree. No planchette, no box, just the board. Desperate and grieving, he tried to talk to his dog. He never told me exactly what came through, but he said he got a response, and this part made my stomach twist around. He didn't say goodbye. And from then on, things in his childhood home turned dark. Doors would open, footsteps creaked when he was alone, and once he swore something shoved him down the back stairs. Moved out before high school, but he always felt like something had followed him. The apartment. By the time I moved into his apartment, he'd already lived there for almost 2 years. Before me, his best friend had been his roommate. Things had been, well, weird there, too. I mean, chairs would overturn, cheap mirrors falling off walls, shadowy figures in reflection at 3 a.m. And his friend swore he'd seen someone pacing in the living room when no one was home. When that friend moved out, another took the room. Same mirror, same figures, no explanations. When I moved in, the activity had nearly stopped, and for months nothing more than the occasional soft creak or unexplained whisper in the kitchen. It fell dormant until that night. The move. We decided to leave the apartment anyway. It was falling apart, and the cheap rent wasn't worth the mold growing under the washing machine. We backed up and started staying in my parents' mother-in-law suite until we could move into our new place. And I had lived in that suite before after my parents' house fire in 2023. The space was cozy and detached and familiar. The lights had dimmers. I used to leave on low at night. I'd never experienced anything strange there, not once. And that changed the second night. We were having dinner with my mom when a glass of vase. A heavy one filled with pebbles, too, slid across the table a couple of inches toward me. Thought maybe I imagined it until I saw my boyfriend's face, completely serious. And after dinner he told me something else. The night before, while I slept, the lights in the suite had brightened and dimmed on their own, not flickered or shifted like somebody had their hand on the switch. As we spoke, the lights above us dimmed, just a little, enough to make my stomach knot. The lights. Now it's Sunday night, or technically early Monday morning. 2:14 a.m. 2 hours ago after my shower, I sat on the couch wrapped in a towel. I was watching the lights pulse again, soft, then bright, then soft. I tried to joke. Maybe it's just faulty wiring. And right on cue, the lights flared to their brightest, making my skin prickle. My boyfriend half-asleep muttered, "Maybe it didn't like your tone." When it went completely dark, I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. My chest was tight. I don't know what this thing is or how long it's been with him, but for the first time it feels like it's not just following him anymore. It's paying attention to me. Whispers in the dim light. story retold, but the fear stays the same. The shadow behind aisle 27. So I started working at the company when I was just 16. I left last week since I've got a new job starting soon. I'll be turning 24 by the end of this month. That means I spent nearly 8 years there, long enough that now I'm out, I might as well share this. When I first joined, everybody used to joke about the place being haunted. They tell stories about boxes sliding off racks, equipment vanishing in the warehouse, voices echoing at night, and that creepy feeling like something was right behind you. I thought it was all nonsense, to be honest, and in the first few years, the only weird things I noticed were flickering lights and the occasional bottle toppling off a shelf. I brushed it off as bad wiring or air pressure changes. Everything shifted in early 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. An older gentleman came into the store and strolled down aisle 2. That's where we kept alcohol and soft drinks. They suddenly collapsed. He'd had a heart attack, and the deputy manager at the time, Josh, rushed over to do CPR. We blocked off the aisle with sheets so customers wouldn't see. But when the paramedics arrived, they told us the man had already gone, and he'd likely died instantly. The store was evacuated, and management decided to close for a few days. The manager went in alone the following Friday to clean up. When we returned Monday, the entire aisle was soaked. Every bottle on that aisle had mysteriously burst overnight. The CCTV footage showed nothing. One minute everything was normal. The next, every bottle shattered at once. And right on the aisle where somebody had just passed away. Paranormal stuff went quiet after that. And Josh, by the way, never came back to work, and I don't blame him. Then came 2021. The store underwent massive refurbishment. We expanded into the unit next door and doubled in size. The old entrance on the left was sealed, and a new one opened on the right, and, well, the aisles flipped entirely. What used to be aisle number 1 was now 28 aisles away. And guess where aisle 27 landed? Exactly where the man died. Management turned it into the toy aisle. Yeah, the toy aisle. I didn't get a say in it, but still, probably not the smartest idea. And that's when things picked up again. Toys would fall off the shelves for no reason. Random noises would play, even when the shelves were empty. And sometimes toys would go missing and show up somewhere else hours later. Sharon, who managed that section, once screamed because she felt somebody breathing down her neck. Later, she found deep red marks on her shoulder. It's like somebody had grabbed her hard and she'd been completely alone at the time. The worst moment for me came a few months ago, around 11 p.m. The store had been closed for an hour. I was finishing up in the warehouse alone. It's always freezing in there because it's all concrete, but that night the air felt different. I felt cold breaths on the back of my neck. And then came the tapping, slow rhythmic taps on the shuttered door from the outside. No one could have been there. It's an isolated industrial estate. I checked the security cameras and there was nothing. I told myself I was overthinking and went back to unloading pallets with my headphones on. What I didn't notice was the shutter slowly rising behind me until a gust of cold air hit me. I spun around and the door was wide open. The only way to open it was with a key that also disables the alarm, and that key was in my pocket. I ran to check outside. No one. Locked it up again and checked the footage. And that's when I froze. The camera above the loading bay. It clearly showed me stepping outside to look around. my shadow stretching behind me. There was another figure, a dark human-shaped shadow standing directly in front of me. It vanished the moment that, this shutter came down. I didn't finish my night shift that night. Locked up early, posted the footage in the staff group chat, and went home shaking. No one could explain it. Nobody even tried to. I left the job now, but don't have the footage anymore. I've asked a friend to send it, and if I get it, I'll post it in the comments. Even after all this time, the thought of that shadow makes my skin crawl. The girl at the landing. My wife has always thought it was kind of an odd thing how much I enjoy watching supernatural horror movies. She often says, "You wouldn't be laughing at them if you'd seen what I've seen." And I used to joke about her sixth sense all the time, until something happened that changed everything. It was a quiet Sunday evening at my aunt's house. We were downstairs watching TV, just the three of us. That's when my wife went upstairs to grab her water bottle from the guest room. She was only gone for maybe a minute, but when she came back down, I could tell immediately something was off. Her face was pale, her hands were trembling slightly, and she was breathing like she'd just run a marathon. She tried to act normal, but I know her too well. She didn't say a word about it until later that night when we were alone. She told me she had paused at the top of the stairs because she saw into the old sewing room. Standing just inside the doorway was a little boy, maybe 6, maybe 7. They were dressed in an old-fashioned school uniform. She said the strangest thing wasn't how real he looked, but the expression on his face, utter surprise, like he hadn't expected her to see him. They stared at each other for what she swore was at least 10 seconds before she bolted down the stairs. She didn't mention it to my aunt or my younger cousin, who were still downstairs, because she didn't want to scare anyone who actually lived there. The next morning, I gently convinced her to tell my aunt. She didn't want to. She hates feeling like she's making things up. But she did eventually do it. As my wife described the boy, my aunt's face froze and her hand went over her mouth. Then she just started sobbing. And after a long pause, she whispered, "That sounds exactly like Leo." Leo was her little brother. He had died when he was 7 years old and falling from the wooden bridge behind their house. No pictures left of him. Most were lost in a house fire decades ago. And this was the first time my wife had ever heard the story. The old tragedy. My aunt told us how back in the 1960s, Leo had been playing near the river with the neighbor kids. One boy, a cousin of theirs, had gotten into a fight with him over a toy boat. When the other kids returned home later, and Leo didn't, a search party found his body caught in the reeds under the bridge where they'd been playing. My aunt had also believed that the cousin had something to do with it, though nothing was ever proven. She carried that guilt her whole life, convinced she could have protected him if she had been sick in the bed that day, or hadn't been. The nightmares. Here's the part that still makes my chest tight when I think about it. When I was a kid up until around age 9, I used to wake up in the middle of the night unable to move at all, really. It felt like invisible hands were pressing down on my throat. I couldn't scream, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't even blink. It would last maybe 20 seconds, then disappear. It never happened when someone else was in the room, only when I was alone. I told my wife about this one night, not really connecting it to anything. She looked at me and said softly, "What if that was him? What if he was trying to tell you?" She thinks Leo might have been held underwater by the boy he fought with. I had never even considered that possibility before. But something about the way everything connected and the look on her face and my aunt's tears and the memory of that feeling shook me to my core. I don't know if it was really him. Maybe it's all just coincidence. But after that night, I stopped laughing at people who, well, say that they've seen things. Some things you can't explain. You're darn tootin'. Whispers down the hallway. During the final 2 years I spent living in the house where I grew up, something odd started to surface. A newer friend of mine once told me that she didn't like walking on the side of the house where my parents' room was. I laughed at first, thinking it was nothing. Curiosity got the better of me. I asked a few of my old friends, the one who'd been over countless times. And to my surprise, they all said the same thing. That side of the house gave them all the creeps, so... To get this going, we would always come in through the back door near my parents' bedroom and the laundry room. I'd walked through there so many times, I stopped noticing how unsettling it really felt. But when they said it out loud, some memories started trickling back to me. When I was a kid, we'd sometimes hear the door to the laundry area slide open and shut, even though nobody was leaving or coming home. It eventually stopped happening, but the strangest thing was these figures. My brother and I used to catch glimpses of something tall, dark shapes gliding from my parents' hallway toward our bedrooms. They'd always flicker at the edge of our sight, and every time I turned around, nothing was ever there. When my friend mentioned those bad vibes, it felt like whatever was lingering there noticed. Little things began happening more often. One night, I'm home alone making popcorn with this old plastic machine. I turned around to grab some salt, and bang! The lid launched off the machine like somebody had smacked it, and I froze. Then I laughed nervously, and because humor is how I deal with fear, I decided to name the ghost Kathy. A few weeks later, my brother and I are watching a movie in the family room. All the lights in the house were off except for the oven clock glow, and I felt a shift in the air like somebody had walked into the kitchen. Figured it was Mom getting water. When I looked up, something was standing in front of the microwave light. I blinked, and just like that, the shape melted into the dark. The last encounter is the one that still makes me uneasy. Getting ready to head out for a birthday party, and Rusty, my beagle, may he rest in peace. Indeed. He was wagging his tail for me for a second and stiffened the next, and his ears shot up and fur raised along his back. A low guttural growl came from his chest. He was staring into my brother's empty room. I didn't see a thing, but the air felt heavy like the room was holding its breath. My hand shook as I grabbed my keys. I called Rusty to me and got out of there fast. Just was tight the entire drive. And looking back, nothing ever really hurt us. But the unease was real, and my parents are deeply religious. House carried a lot of tension back then. Space was always cluttered, whether it was a ghost or just energy of everything we'd been through. The side of that house never felt still. What do you think? Coincidence or something else? Coinky-dink. The Whisper at the Closet Wall. I moved into my current house in 2016, fully aware that something strange had once happened here. My friend and neighbor, Chuck, he rented this place more than 20 years ago. He told me back then the house was haunted, not by a friendly spirit, mind you. Chuck isn't the kind of man who jokes about this stuff. He runs a successful electrical company, never drinks, never exaggerates. So when he told me pictures had slid off walls or doors slammed by themselves and footsteps echoed in empty rooms, I believed him. According to him, the activity got so bad they eventually called in someone. Not just a priest, but a whole team to cleanse the place. Chuck didn't stay long enough to see how it ended. He packed up and moved out before they finished. When I moved in, the house was feeling heavy, like the air was holding its breath. The far wall of my bedroom closet gave me the worst feeling, especially the left corner, as if the temperature there dropped a few degrees. I tried cleansing the house with sage or walking from room to room, whispering for the spirit to leave, but nothing would change. Months later, my son and his family came to visit. And one evening, as he wandered through the sunroom playing his guitar, he stopped mid-song and glanced toward the closet wall that backs up to my bedroom. He pointed and said almost absent-mindedly, "Somebody died right there." I froze and I said, "What do you mean?" I had never told him anything about the haunting. He strummed another chord and said, "Somebody hanged himself in that corner." Hairs on my arms rose, and for a long time after that, the ghost was quiet, except for the dogs. They'd stand growling at the closet at random hours, and the metal clothing rod fell down 3 times without reason. We ended up suspending it from the ceiling with chains, and ironically, right at the spot where the man supposedly had died. 2 years ago, something else happened. Plugged my phone into a charger like always, turned away, and then a loud crack split the silence. My phone was on the floor 3 feet away from me, cord whipped in the opposite direction, and the charging block was dangling. No smoke, no short circuit, and the TV plugged into the same outlet was still on. It felt like somebody had hit the wall with a sledgehammer. And after that night, the strange energy seemed to fade, or at least it lay low. Then 2 weeks ago, while I was making dinner, the metal strainer hanging on the pegboard above the stove started swinging. Slow and deliberate, like an invisible hand was pushing it. I turned, half laughing, and said, "All right, I know you're here." Then I went on cooking like nothing happened. And that night, lying in bed watching TV, loud music suddenly starts playing. Thought it was my husband on the computer in the living room, but no, it was the Alexa on my nightstand. Told it to stop, and it didn't, and the volume went up. And the song, as she talks to angels by the Black Crows, wasn't just playing in the bedroom, it was blasting on every smart speaker in the house. Still proud I don't even know what an Alexa looks like. I may not be old, but I'm old-fashioned. My household ghost talked to my niece and daughter. I, a 25-year-old male, moved into a new house in November. I'm renting, so I have a 12-month lease. And honestly, I love the house, but there's definitely something paranormal here. It started with small things, like lights flickering and my bedroom light turning off when it wasn't even touched. I chalked it up to electrical problems. Then, about a month into us living here, my 27-year-old girlfriend started saying she felt like something was watching her, and the house was creepy when she was alone. Allegedly. Excuse me. A few weeks after that, we started randomly hearing footsteps on our ceiling, like someone was upstairs. We would also regularly hear a singular knock on our front door every now and then, as when nobody was there. And also that light that would turn off in our room started turning off whenever we were getting dressed. Our cat started meowing at the ceiling in the laundry room every day, which is between our living room and the garage, and it also shares a wall with our bedroom. In January, I'm home alone with my 2 kids. S, a 10-year-old male, and E, a 6-year-old female. Back this up. Your son is 10 years old and you are 25. Alrighty then. Moving on. We were on the couch, which is on the opposite wall of our TV, when the TV was off. My son was telling my daughter and I a joke when suddenly In the middle of it, the TV remote moved on the TV stand. It knocked over a Harry Potter wand to the ground. Our cats were asleep on the couch with us. It was unexplainable and freaked me out. The worst event was in March, during spring break. I had my niece, R, a 6-year-old female, over spending the night. And her and my daughter E were in the garage, which we've converted to a playroom. They were playing games. I was on the couch inside the living room. My girlfriend was outside smoking. My son was at his grandma's house. Suddenly I heard my daughter yell, "Yeah?" I didn't respond because I didn't say anything to her, so I thought she was talking to R. Then my daughter and niece both ran into the room and asked what I needed because they heard somebody call to them. My niece said it sounded like my mom. From her perspective, you know. I told them I didn't say anything. Nobody said anything. And they both explained to me that they definitely heard someone say both of their names, and to tell them to come here. They said it sounded like a whisper, but they were convinced it was my sister's voice, R's mom. I immediately called my sister and explained this to her because I was shocked, and these two little girls were both so sure of what they heard and were so scared that they wouldn't go back into the garage, or even go to get their shoes and toys. This is not the first time these girls have talked to the paranormal, unfortunately. My sister and I moved very close to each other in 2021, and I moved into my house first. The girls were 2 at the time, and my daughter didn't speak for the first 3 years of her life. But I caught her on the baby monitor talking to her ceiling in babble talk almost nightly. My niece spoke perfect words, and when they moved into their house, I watched my niece at my house while they moved their things in. A few days later, my niece told my sister and I that the demon that lives in my house came with her home to her new house. She explained that he got into the car with her and came home with her. This whole thing freaks me out. I got sick from a town full of witches. Doctors found nothing. An old man in a hidden house cured me. My stepdad's side of the family is from a province I won't name for obvious reasons. People there are different. The place has a reputation. Locals say that there are Mankukulam living there. Folk witches, both good and bad. Everyone in the area is careful about how they act, and what they say and who they look at. Even my stepdad warned me, always be respectful and never let your guard down. Anyway, we went there for a short visit. One afternoon, I bought a sealed bag of chips and was walking and snacking when I felt somebody behind me blow air directly at the back of my neck. It wasn't just wind, it was like somebody exhaled on me. I turned around, no one was there, and just a few old houses and quiet streets. I brushed it off. A few hours later, I started feeling really weird and dizzy and heavy. I lost my appetite completely, and my sense of taste disappeared. I couldn't enjoy food and couldn't sleep well. Just felt drained. My chest was tight, but no fever. We went to a hospital the next day for blood tests and vitals, and everything came back as normal. Doctors told me I was fine, maybe just stressed or tired. But I knew something was wrong, and I felt off, and I wasn't the only one who thought so. My stepdad immediately took me to somebody he knew, an old man who lived in a hidden house far from the center of town. No signs, no lights, just a path locals apparently already knew. And this guy was quiet and calm. Didn't ask questions, just told me to sit. Placed his hands on my head and muttered something in a language I didn't recognize, then blew gently over the top of my hair. He handed me a small shot of some kind, some bland-tasting oil, and told me to drink it. I don't even know what was in it, but I followed along. Nothing happened instantly, but about a day later I started feeling normal again. Appetite came back and taste returned, and the fog in my head lifted. Whatever that old man did, spelled prayer or placebo, well, I don't know, but it worked. I'm not saying I believe in kulam or spirits, but I can't explain what happened either. I just know that something invisible messed with me, and science didn't catch it. Be careful out there, especially if you're visiting places with deep-rooted traditions. Some things can't be explained, and sometimes the old ways still have power, whether you believe or not. I'd let that guy blow on my head. Just wouldn't be any hair. How is the baby? I've lived in the same small, rundown trailer park since birth, essentially. It was rampant with drugs and shady characters. The most popular drink and drug of choice at the time were heroin and beer. When I was 8, my mom married a man named Paul. Paul had been in a pretty bad car accident shortly before meeting my mom and was prescribed oxycodone for the pain. He quickly got hooked, so soon after the authorities began cracking down on overprescriptions for opioids, and Paul was no longer able to legally get his fix. He turned to the streets, and at $30 a pill, he had to find something else. He eventually just graduated to injecting heroin. Is that cheaper? Anyway, Paul had a friend named Luke, whom he met when he first started using heroin. Luke was a seasoned drug user and a drunk. Luke and Paul got along well, and since I grew up in this trailer park, Luke had been around just as long as I had. He knew me when I was a child, and he knew me as a teen. I'd pass by Luke often, especially when I went to check the mail. He'd be walking the opposite way, heading to a neighbor's house, and would always say, "Hey, sweetie." Luke could be drunk as a skunk and barely able to walk from being high, so he'd always straighten himself up just enough to slur out a "hey, sweetie" when he saw me. Luke was around when I had my first child, a daughter at 16. I was still in high school, and "hey, sweetie" eventually turned into "how's the baby?" Every time I saw him, whether or not I had my daughter with me. About a year after having my daughter, I went to school, and when I came home from the bus stop, I saw tons of police near our trailer. I was still a few yards away, so I kept approaching, trying to see what was going on. There was caution tape around the house, and the back door was hanging open. And as a teenager, I brazenly started up the 3 steps that led into the trailer. But a deputy stopped me, told me I couldn't go inside. "What do you mean I can't go inside? I live here," I said. The deputy responded, "I can't let you in, it's a crime scene." When Paul appeared, much to my dismay, and by this time Paul was a full-blown addict who had broken my mom down mentally, emotionally, and financially. And if Paul was here, my mom was at work as a preschool teacher, and my daughter was at that same school, so what was going on? Paul explained that around 10 a.m., Luke had come over to hang out. Paul was sitting in the recliner strumming his guitar, while Luke stood in the kitchen. The kitchen had a countertop that separated the living room from the kitchen, so Luke was out of Paul's direct line of sight. Paul said that Luke came over extremely intoxicated with a beer in hand, and after a few moments, Luke fell down, and Paul assumed that he had just passed out drunk. Luke was lying there for 2 to 3 hours, and Paul continued strumming his guitar, even singing a song about Buddy Luke passing out and puking. It wasn't until Paul had to use the restroom that he noticed Luke wasn't just passed out, he was blue. Paul immediately called 911. They instructed him to perform CPR, which he did, and he described it as the single most foul thing he'd ever attempted to do. Luke had died and vomited, and every time Paul tried mouth-to-mouth, vomit would come out. And after a while, Paul couldn't continue and just waited for emergency personnel. The call to 911 was made at 1:12 p.m. By the time I got home around 3:45, the body had been removed, but the scene was still treated as suspicious. Because of that, nobody was allowed inside. Eventually, the police let Paul back in, but it wasn't until after 6:30 p.m. that my mom came home. She was very angry, and my daughter and I were just waiting to go inside. Paul said he'd go in and clean up whatever mess was left behind. According to him, there's a lot to clean up, and about an hour later, he said that we could come in. The kitchen floor was so sticky you could hear your feet stick to the linoleum when you walked across it. Heroin addicts aren't exactly the best maids, so we lived in that trailer for at least another year. But I never walked across that floor barefoot, nor did I let my child walk across it either. No matter how much we cleaned, it would always feel sticky. About 6 months after Luke passed away in our kitchen, I was standing outside, leaning on the bed of the truck and talking to a friend. The trailer I was standing outside of happened to be the one Luke had lived in for many years before moving to a different one, where he was living at the time of his death. My friend now lived in that same trailer. We were just hanging out and talking when I heard a very clear, very familiar voice. "How's the baby?" Fate of Paul. Paul later confessed to me that when Luke passed away, he had taken Luke's used syringe out of his sock and used it to inject himself later that night. After leaving the trailer, we lived in a small rented house for about a year before my mom left Paul. Paul went back to the trailer park, dragged the mattress him and my mom shared into the overgrown, now wooded area of a destroyed playground. It's a playground that belongs to the church next door. He had a large tent, and that's where he lived, and he lived for 6 months after my mom left him. He shot up in his tent and nodded out with a lit cigarette, like I'd seen him so many times. Usually it was just wind up burning his leg and he'd wake up, but this time it caught the mattress on fire. He asphyxiated due to an overdose of heroin laced with fentanyl and burned, only being found 3 days later by a friend who couldn't see the top of his tent anymore, as he put it. He was identified by dental records. Yucky. My time in the Caribbean. So this happened when I was around 8 to 10 years old, visiting my grandma's house in Trinidad. And it was me, my grandma, a couple of uncles, and my sister all staying there. The house already had a reputation. Everybody always talked about seeing or hearing ghosts there. But I just brushed it off as family superstition. Caribbean people always talking about spirits and duppies? And I thought it was just old folks being dramatic. But anyway, one night I'm sleeping in the guest room, one of my sisters, with my aunt, and I start hearing this soft crying voice like a young girl sobbing. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but it was definitely a child's voice, and younger than anyone in the house. I was the youngest, so it made no sense. It freaked me out immediately. Now, the guest room was right across from the stairs, and to get to my grandma's room, I had to run up the stairwell. So what do? I wrap myself up like a burrito in my blanket. I make a run for it. Not looking at anything, just my feet hitting the floor. I bust into my grandma's room, turn on the light, and slam the door, and she wakes up instantly, like she knew something was off. Before I could even say anything, We both hear the crying too. She just pulls me in and holds me, tells me it's okay and that she knows how to help her, the spirit. Caribbean grandmas are scary calm when it comes to this voodoo stuff, man. Then she gets up and I literally beg her not to leave, and I didn't care that the lights were on. I didn't want her to just be out there alone. But she closes the door behind her and goes anyway. I'm in bed, still wrapped in a blanket. Can't even look around the room. Every little creak makes me feel like I'm about to die. Then I hear her voice, my grandma. She says she's back and everything's okay, and I feel somebody sit on the edge of the bed. But there's no sound of the mattress creaking, which is a red flag. I ask her to put her hands on the mattress so I can see them before I come out, and she does. I slowly lift the blanket and check everything in her hands and arms and nightgown. All normal, till I get to her neck. Her skin is pitch black, like unnatural shadow black, and I lose it. Blanket goes back over my head and I'm silently sobbing, full on snot faucet mode. Eventually, the weight on the bed lifts and now the mattress creaks. When my real grandma finally comes back, I hear the door open this time, green flag. She says, "Mama, I'm back." I still don't trust it fully, so I ask her to put her hands down too. She sits next to me, springs creak again, which is a green flag, and number 2, and pulls me in for a hug through the blanket, and I can feel it's really her. I rip the blanket off. She calms me down and tells me that she helped the little girl find the light. I tell her about the fake version of her that came back while she was gone, and she hugs me tighter. She tells me to feel her chest. Her soft skin and steady heartbeat honestly grounded me again. Then she picks me up, and Caribbean grandmas are strong. Tells me she needs to get some things from downstairs, and this time she's bringing me with her. I'm terrified, but I hold on to her tight and her heartbeat keeps me calm. And here's the creepy part. She doesn't turn on a single light going down the stairs or back up. Could have, just didn't. And her heartbeat stayed completely steady, like she wasn't scared at all. Back in her room, she sits me down and starts placing all these spiritual items around, like stone statues and paper with writing and cups with sand or something. I keep begging her to close the door because I can't stop looking at the pitch black hallway, but she tells me, "Doors don't keep spirits out, your mind does," and says she'll be making sure nothing gets in. She tucks me in and turns off the lights. I panicked, but she kept her hand on my head, covering my eyes gently like she always does when she sings me to sleep. I eventually pass out. The next morning I wake up to sunlight and voices in the house, and my uncles are talking low in the kitchen. I go out, and my grandma's just sitting at the table like always. I've been too scared to ask her what really happened that night. We don't talk about ghosts, unless she brings it up. But yeah, that's my Caribbean ghost story. The Oz effect experience. That silence feeling, being watched. Yeah, I'd recommend you to listen to it. Last summer I had this feeling, in the middle of the woods in a spot in the Caribou goldfields. Caribou, maybe. Where a triple murder and robbery took place in the 1860s. I was on the Old North Trail in an area called Murderer's Gulch, on a secondary road into an abandoned mine. This place is deep in grizzly bear country, in thick forest. It was a hot, sunny summer day. No people live within miles of this place. One can Google for the story of the murders and robbery. My girlfriend and I wanted to check the area out after hearing the story. The main roads washed out, so we took the Old North Trail. That's where the robbery took place over a century ago, which is now an old deactivated logging road down to the opposite side of the main road past the washout. that leads into the abandoned mine. The main road had been totally washed out at Murderer's Creek several years earlier. The secondary road we took was not great, which had small washouts and was very overgrown. We spent 2 days clearing and fixing the road, and on the second day, we decided to walk the rest of the road to get a sense of whether it was worth continuing trying to fix said road to get down to the abandoned mine in my truck. But anyway, before we went down on foot, my girlfriend wandered down the road a bit and came running back as I was digging away past a small washout in the road. She asked me if I heard that sound, in quotes. Well, I had not heard anything as I was shoveling, just filling the small washout to a point to get my truck further down said road. We walked down to the abandoned mine to see how much work was ahead of us. I had my .45-70 lever-action guide gun with me, since we were in bear country. It was a steep grade with a cliff down to the mine site, hundreds of feet below and thick forest on the other side of the road. Basically, it's a bottleneck the whole way down for about 1.5 miles. We got down, looked around the abandoned mine for about an hour, before heading back up the steep road to my truck, and on the way back I had an off vibe. I stopped before the V onto the bypass road that we came down. I felt something was off, like we were being watched. A big danger feeling where my hair stood up. My girlfriend asked if everything was okay, and I said, yeah, not wanting to freak her out. But I stood still listening, and I could tell she felt it too. And that's when I noticed it was silent. No sounds, no birds chirping, just silence. Then a squirrel lost its shit, chirping the danger sounds that they do. Then we heard 3 very loud knocks up the road back to the truck coming from the woods. Loud and spaced about a second apart between each knock. It was like somebody smashing a big rock on a tree not far behind the tree line. This being up the way that we had to go to get back to my truck. We kept walking toward it. There was no choice if we were to get out of there. It was hot and steep, and there was no way we could run due to the grade of the hill. Then we heard something. It was following us off to the left in the forest. Then 5 loud knocks 200 meters up the road from the last knocks. We were in the bottleneck, a steep cliff to the mine on the right, close knocks to the forest on the left. I looked at my girlfriend and said, we have to get the fuck out of here. We pushed up the steep road, me keeping an eye on the forest, ready to shoot whatever it was that was following us. It was the scariest walk of my life, but we got to the truck and got out of there. The sound my girlfriend heard prior to heading down turned out to be the same knocking sound we heard in the walk back up. My ghost story. I still get chills thinking about what happened during my senior year of high school. It all started with this rumor about our school theater being haunted. I know. Haunted theater, tale as old as time. But I swear, this is at least my experience. When I was going through the theater program, older students used to talk about a ghost circle. A circle drawn in chalk on the backstage wall. They said it was there to bind a ghost, and everyone was warned never to break it. No one ever explained exactly what would happen if you did, but even the skeptics wouldn't mess with it. The summer before my senior year, the school started remodeling the theater. They repainted the entire place, including the wall with the ghost circle, painted right over it, as if it never existed. And that's when the strange things began. Almost immediately, weird stuff started happening. The janitor, usually very professional, suddenly refused to clean the theater at night, wouldn't go near the prop closet anymore. She seemed genuinely spooked, and the prop closet would make banging noises like pipes clanging. But the moment somebody opened the door, the noises stopped. props would disappear or turn up in odd places, and there was often a shadowy figure on stage, which we tried to blame on the lighting. Never felt right. I got really curious after everything creepy started and did some research about the ghost story. Found out that a former student, deeply involved in a theater program, had died in a car accident years earlier, right before a show. And out of respect, I won't share more details about him, but knowing this added a whole new layer to the weirdness. The culmination of weirdness was during the senior show I was directing that December. Tech kept glitching and lights malfunctioned and sound cues failed. Things that worked perfectly for weeks in rehearsal started suddenly breaking. On closing night, the house lights refused to work, so I gathered up the cast and crew and we respectfully asked the ghost to stop interfering. The moment we did, the lights flicked on instantly and I said, "Thank you," out loud, thinking it was polite. But looking back, that's probably when the ghost attached to me. After the show, my stage manager gave me a bouquet of flowers. I took them home, put them in a vase or a vase, whichever wording you guys fancy. I'm going with vase today. They put them in a vase on the kitchen table. I spent the rest of my night sat at the table talking with my aunt who was visiting. And after literal hours of chatting, 3 of the flowers suddenly slumped over at the same time. They didn't just bend, they looked like their stems had been cleanly cut, revealing the inside of the stems. I couldn't explain why or how it happened after they'd stood perfectly all evening. I didn't tell my aunt about the ghost then, even though it felt exactly like something we'd expect from the theater spirit. Weird things started happening at home. I slept in the finished basement, where my bed was in the corner, and the doorways only had curtains instead of doors. Sometimes I'd wake up to see the curtains swaying and thought it was just drafts. Then one night I felt my bed dip behind me as if somebody sat down. When I turned around, no one was there. Later, my aunt stayed over again in another part of the basement. And one morning, she told me she thought the dog had jumped in bed with her. She felt something run up her body, but when she opened her eyes, the dog was, well, no dog was there. The dog had been locked upstairs all night. That's when I finally told her everything about the ghost. She suggested calmly communicating with him and asking him to leave me alone while I was sleeping. We kept it between us and didn't tell the rest of my family yet. Months later, one of my sisters had a friend sleep over. She and my sister shared a bed while my other sister slept on the ground next to them. The next morning, the friend said that the sister, who was supposed to be sleeping on the floor next to the bed, held her hand all night. She gushed about how sweet it was. But the sister denied this, saying she went back to her own bed early, didn't hold anyone's hand. The friend was so freaked out she never stayed over again. Eventually, I told my family about the ghost following me home, and they shared their own experiences. One sister heard a loud bang one night and found a bag had fallen off a shelf for no reason. Another kept hearing noises from her closet that stopped whenever she opened it. But luckily, nothing was ever out of place. That was just the beginning. There were more strange incidents over the next couple of years, like noises and movements. Little things that still make me shiver. But then, almost as suddenly as it began, it all stopped, and it's been years now. I have no idea why the ghost left or what made him move on, and my family and I almost joke about him now. Like he was just some weird, invisible member of the household. Since then, nothing unusual has happened, and life's gone back to normal. There were a few other incidents that came to mind for me writing this post, but I'll have to ask my family to remember the majority of them. It's not the scariest by any means, but I swear to everybody I know, we had a ghost for at least a few years. Strange activity in my home. Hi. I think my house has at least one ghost. It's very hard to tell, though, because we are a family of ADHDers and have a bunch of pets. I'm writing this on my phone, so please forgive the formatting. For some background, I grew up in this house. My parents bought it from a family who bought it new in 1976. Only lived here for about 4 years. My parents rented it out to one family for about 4 years in the 90s before I bought it from them and moved my new little family back in. The neighborhood is built on an old limestone quarry. I've lived here for most of my life, except for a few years in my teens. As a child, I always felt watched, and I'd sit in my window at night and felt something in the backyard in the dark just watching. It wasn't scary, just present. There's also a central part of the house, between the hall and the garage and laundry room, that feels spooky. My sister corroborated the spooky feeling one time when she was visiting and told me about a time when she was doing laundry. She was overcome with the feeling of get out. In my previous marriage, we had a lot of my then-husband's family living here. At one time, there were 7 children under the age of 12. All of them were afraid of this area. Multiple adults have pointed out that it feels eerie there as well. Over the last couple of years, I've noticed more activity in the house. The notable things are, 1, phantom cat jumping onto the bed. I was working overnights at the time and would spend my off nights in a sleeping house. One night, I'm laying in bed with my now husband who was sleeping. I was browsing the internet when I felt a cat jump on the bed and walk between my husband and me, then laid down. We put the pets up at night and keep them out of the room while we sleep. I thought maybe we missed putting one of them, so I shone my flashlight over to where I thought it was. Nothing was there. I felt around and still nothing. I hopped up and did a head count of pets, and everyone was accounted for. 2. Loud crashing of shelves to the ground with nothing out of place. For a couple of months, randomly, a loud crashing noise was coming from the office. And we have a bunch of shelves on the walls, and those shelves are full of crap. Collectibles and Legos and pictures and trinkets, so you get the point. So hearing one of those shelves come crashing down and stuff breaking and flying across our tile floor was alarming. But when we'd go to check on it, nothing would be out of place, and this happened at least 5 times. I was not the only one to hear it, and I wasn't the only one to go check. I have a video from my security camera of the noise, and the camera was pointed at the puppy crate. 3. A hanging plant was torn from its place. I had some small succulents hanging in my window in the kitchen. One was a little guy in a swing hanging from twine. The twine was fairly substantial. It was in good condition that day when I checked the moisture level of the soil. I wish I had taken a picture of the twine after this happened, but I wasn't thinking of documenting anything yet. But as I was saying, in the early hours of the morning, the twine was pulled apart at all 3 supporting points, and my plant went tumbling. The most striking thing about this is that my dogs didn't bark, and if I set something down too hard in my nightstand in the night, my dogs will go off. But nothing here. It's like they were watching and the noise was expected. I have a recording of the noise and the silence that follows, and I checked the video to see if there's a cat to blame, but none of them seemed to be over there when it happened. 4. Sunglasses go missing, and they're later found in a reusable baggie in the sink. And this is a weird one that I can't figure out. I was alone at home and getting ready to leave for an appointment. I have to have my sunglasses to dry because daylight hurts my eyes, and as I was leaving, I opened my purse and checked for and saw my glasses and put my phone in my purse. Then I decided I should use the bathroom before I left. I set my purse down, went to the bathroom. Then I grabbed my purse and went to the drawer while digging for my glasses. Not in there. Stumped, I retraced my steps and I couldn't find them. I searched for a few minutes but had to go, and When I got home again, I searched again and found nothing. And like I said, I have ADHD, so I'll often lose something I'm holding, but can usually find it. I keep looking and getting rather frustrated. I eventually pull my husband in to help look. Nothing. I give up for the evening and I go do the dishes, and in the sink inside of a reusable sandwich bag are my glasses. And this weirds me out enough to review my security camera footage because did I put them in there? No, I saw on the tape where I put the bag in the sink the night before. I saw me searching for the glasses, and then when my husband and I were talking about where they could be, I saw the bag open by itself. Like the ghost was trying to help or something. Well, I don't know. Seems so strange. These are the most recent and, well, most my attention-grabbing of incidents. There's always something weird happening, but 99% of the time I can attribute it immediately to my ADHD or pad. Star falling into my room. Please help me understand. When I was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, I had this thing happen to me that I think about all the time now. I completely forgot it for years, like really forgot. Till recently, it just came out of me while I was talking. Now I can't stop talking about it. It was real, and I know it happened. I was in bed with a tooth underneath my pillow, waiting for the tooth fairy. I always sleep in my stomach, but this time I'd flipped onto my back because I was waiting for my dad to come and tuck me in. I remember being really excited. I was not sleepy. I was wide awake watching the sliver of sky I could see from my window. Just a little strip between the storm blinds and the neighbor's house. Not a big view, just enough to see a single star. I was staring at that star, and then it started to fall. It began small, like it was way up in the sky, but it got bigger as it came closer, like a glowing orb. Not perfectly round, more like a pulsing, glowing, spiky or round shape that stretched larger as it got closer. And as it got bigger and came toward me, I heard this buzzing sound. Not loud, but definitely there, like a hum. Like something electrical but soft and, well, very soft. The sound's not the important thing here. The sound was like almost to cover the sound of anything else in my reality as the light was getting closer. I was completely frozen. I couldn't move, not even blink. But I wasn't scared, I was just stuck, watching this happen. The star got bigger and bigger until it was huge, and it came through my window. It didn't break anything, it just entered, like it phased into the room. The light completely took over my vision, and I couldn't see my bed, the walls, or anything. Just pure white light. Total whiteout. It's like it entered me. Then suddenly I gasped and I sat up like my whole body jolted upright. And time had passed because the dollar was under my pillow and the tooth was gone. My dad wasn't in the bathroom anymore like he had been when I first lay down. I'd seen the light under the door and heard him washing his hands, but now it was quiet and it was done, and I'd missed it. But to me, it felt like no time had passed at all, like the whole thing was maybe an instant. I grabbed the dollar and I ran to wake up my dad, telling him I saw the tooth fairy, because that's what I thought it was at the time. That was how my little kid brain tried to make sense of it, but he said, okay, and brushed it off. But I know I wasn't asleep. I was awake and excited and watching. This wasn't a dream. It really happened. The only other time I've seen something shaped like that, this featureless glowing being or presence, was when I was 16. I had this dream where I floated into a different place. It was like sky above the sky below. I was just drifting inside of it, very surreal and dualistic. There was this massive wall of light, and from inside it something started walking toward me. It didn't have a face or arms or features, but I knew it was a being, and it just pushed me back and said, not yet. And that was all. Then I was suddenly back in my body again. The shape of that thing, the way it moved forward and how I just couldn't resist it. That's exactly what this light star thing felt like as I entered my room. Not threatening, just undeniable, like it was coming no matter what. I don't know what it was. I don't know why it happened to me. Didn't even remember it happened until very recently. I guess I tucked it away. Told maybe 1 or 2 people, but it came back online about a year ago, and I'm so curious to understand what it meant for me as I'm learning to understand myself. So I just want to know, has anybody ever had something like this happen to them? A star falling from the sky, getting bigger and entering your room, filling it with light and then just being gone. No vision, no message, just that. Not astral projection, not sleep paralysis. I'm talking about a star falling into your room at night. Only the sticky green ones on the ceiling, for me. The Boy by the Door. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood just a few blocks away from an old train line that everybody said was built over what used to be a forgotten graveyard. Rumor had it the workers never moved the graves, just built the tracks on top of them. Some people whispered about restless souls wandering the streets at night. And at the end of our cul-de-sac lived an older couple who loved telling stories. One summer evening, they came over to talk with my parents. I overheard them describing something that happened a few nights before. Their 2 German shepherds had started barking uncontrollably. They were facing their tall wooden side gate, as if something or someone was on the other side of it. When they stepped outside with the flashlight, they saw a large shadow standing perfectly still between the gate and their shed. The closer they got, the stranger it became. It wasn't just a shadow. It was a man dressed in dark clothing. No head at all, though. He didn't move, not a sound came from him. The couple grabbed their dogs and ran back inside, locking the doors behind them. My parents talked about it for days, and even as a kid, I didn't fully believe in ghosts. I must have been about 6 years old then. Memories from that age usually blur together, but that particular night is carved into my mind like it happened yesterday. And our house was a single-story place with a long hallway running from the living room straight to the garage. My sister's room and mine were at the very end, across from each other. We always kept our doors open because we were too young to sleep in the dark. I was lying on my side in my little white metal bed, staring at the doorway as I tried to sleep. That's when I saw something crawl around the corner. It was a small, pale boy with grayish skin and hair stringy and completely naked. He was on his hands and knees, moving far too fast to be human. He scurried into my room without a sound, straight toward my bed, and then vanished right beside it. I froze, and my heart was pounding so loud it felt like the only sound in the room. And just when I thought I'd imagined it, his head popped up over the edge of the mattress. His eyes met mine, cold and empty, lifted his hands and shoved my stomach with surprising force. I gasped and curled up, unable to scream, and he dropped out of sight. When I finally forced myself to peek over the side, he was gone. Not a sound, not a shadow, nothing. And as the years passed, I would sometimes remember that night in fragments. But the image of that boy has always remained clear. Never appeared to me again. Never slept with my door open again after that, though. Hopefully, see you tomorrow. Sweet dreams.
Welcome to the realm of the enigmatic at Paranormal M. Subscribe and turn on notifications to journey into stories that push the boundaries of possibility. Get ready to be enthralled by our latest tales. Being watched over by the unknown. About 5 or 7-ish months again, I decided to hang out with my ex-wife to see how things were going. A foolish mistake that I chose to partake in. I meet up with her at nighttime, and I just drove around town. I had a feeling that I shouldn't be around her due to obvious reasons as to why I divorced her in the first place. But my human mentality of maintaining a relationship took over. There were 3 warnings, I guess you could say, that happened throughout the night. I'd like your thoughts and interpretation and explanation on this strange night. I had gotten pulled over because my headlights weren't on. I haven't gotten pulled over in about 3 years since this experience. The officer, being a kind man, as well informed me that my taillights weren't on. I gave him a surprised expression and said, "Huh, that's weird because from my switch here it's telling me that they should be on." He raised his eyebrow, walked to the back of my car, came back and said, "Surprisingly, they're on now." I didn't touch my car light switch at all. They were supposedly on the entire time from when I started my car like 30 minutes prior to this. The officer apologized for the misunderstanding and bid me a good night. Nice guy. 2. We were driving around in the country back roads. Ended up in a small town. I wanted to park and chill because the cop experience weirded me out a little bit. I pulled into the parking lot of a much older church and drove all the way in the back so that no other cop would pull up and question me. I park in the back and turned my car off. Me and her start conversing, and about 20 minutes into the conversation, we both noticed that the street lamp in front of us was flickering at an odd pattern. The lamp would flicker violently for a couple seconds and fade in and out of brightness before being shut off. We look at each other confused. The lamp next to the one had been shut off repeated in the same pattern but backwards. It faded in and out of brightness, flickered violently and then shut off. A sense of dread and doom filled the atmosphere around us. I turned my car on and slowly drove out of the parking lot. When I turned onto the main road and began to drive away, I glanced over to my rearview mirror and saw that the same 2 lampposts turned back on simultaneously. 3. Coming from the old church, we drove back to the city that I'd gotten pulled over in. I parked in front of a closed coastal Mexican food restaurant. We started talking, and the atmosphere in the vehicle got hot and heavy. She wanted to make out and made the first move. Me being me, I didn't decline this offer. We started to make out. I told her to get in the back. She did, and I followed. As things were on the verge of getting far from just a simple makeout session, as clear as day, we both heard a loud, intense, and heavy growl from what seemed like a beast coming from the rear passenger side of my car. The growl vibrated the vehicle from what felt like. We stopped, sharing an expression of fear towards one another. I hear a disembodied voice say, "Tell her to leave." I get out and investigate around the car. Me and her are the only living things out here. I tell her that we need to leave and the night's over. I drive her back to her car and we go our separate ways. I later found out that my ex-wife had been using black magic on me for years and had been paying witches to manipulate my emotions and beliefs. This was as a result to continue staying with her and seeing her when I shouldn't be. My personal belief is that my guardian angel, or whatever being it was trying to warn me and alert me to not see this woman again. Lucky guy. Me being stubborn as hell, or having my judgment clouded by dark forces, didn't really work until it became obvious. A whole ass different level of craziness. So what are your thoughts? Tell me of your first most prominent ghost encounter. Mine was when I was 16 years old, March 18th. I'm 44 now. I was asleep in my bed in the dark. Suddenly, I woke up because someone called me. Immediately, I recognized my grandmother. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, but I knew it was her. She said she loved me and she had died. She had to leave. Suddenly, I started crying. I got up, stumbled around until I reached the door and opened it. It was daybreak, with a very faint glow in the lighting in the hallway that door opened to. I saw down on the pavement of the hallway, crying for what felt like forever. In truth, it was less than 20 minutes. The phone started to ring. My sister got up, walked by me, looked at me and asked, "What the heck are you crying?" Then ignored me and went to answer the phone. What I heard was, "I'll go call her now." My sister enters my parents' bedroom, which is right in front of me in the hallway, and my mom comes out. She looks at me with surprise, doesn't say a word, and goes to the telephone, which is ahead in the entryway at the end of the hallway. And then I hear, when and how it happened. At this point, everybody is up and about. Everyone saw me sitting there crying on the floor. I heard Mom saying that her mom, my grandma, died 20 minutes prior, and her aunt had just called to give the news. At this point, everybody knows that I knew she passed before the phone call, but nobody says a thing. Everyone swipes it under the rug, acting as if nothing happened with me. Crying for hours, no one will believe me when I even say it, even though they all witnessed it as it happened. Do you see shadow people with your physical eyes? I can see a couple types of shadow people with my own eyes. The first time happened when I was with a friend. She's also a sensitive. It was a late evening, and we were on a street which is usually busy, but at that time of the day, it's fully emptied. She was driving. I was on the seat next to her, and another friend was in the back. Suddenly I see this shadow zap super fast in front of us crossing the road. It was shaped as a human but completely black, not see-through. We all were laughing and chatting, making loud jokes, and suddenly I shut up. She shuts up and stops the car right then and there. We both look left and right, then we realize we both saw that. We look at each other and simultaneously said, "Did you see that?" The person in the black, which also was looking forward as we did, saw nothing. I'm assuming they meant person in the back. Same spot sometime again later. I was walking back home and I saw it again, but this time was standing next to a street light. My friend and I did some digging and found out some months prior a boy died on the intersection on a motorcycle accident, which still made waves because of some controversies. Earthbound spirit? We wondered. Fast forward a few years and I met a few times a different kind of shadow people. I'm not sure what it is, but I call them leeches. Why? Every time I've seen them, they were hovering behind next to a living person, like attached to them. I thought I was losing it, but this event that happened once at a friend's house made me rethink it. She was a woman with a lot, and I mean a lot, of unresolved anger. The type that are hyenas to everybody but her friends. We were at her house, a total of 4 people, 3 female, 1 male. We had dinner. We were sitting in the kitchen having drinks and snacks. We were telling funny stories and we were laughing loudly. You know those situations where you laugh so much that your tears kind of form in your eyes? Well, I'm there, talking with my girlfriend, and I mentioned that she's sitting at the head of the table, alone. And I see this perfectly formed human-shaped shadow, fully black, dark and perfectly defined. The thing is bent on her right shoulder, looking forward, listening. And I felt this sudden ice in my veins. I had a sudden fit of nausea and my guts felt like they twisted in my belly. I kept looking in a state of shock, and the thing, when it realized I could see it, jumped back. I could feel its surprise, that I could even see it, and in a fast, sudden instant whoosh, it disappeared. Ran away so fast I saw this black whooshing blob just for that instant. I was telling a joke, but suddenly I shut up. Imagine the scene. 3 people that were loudly laughing suddenly and simultaneously are looking at me with a terror-stricken face, all asking, "What? What did you see?" They said my face turned gray. They saw the blood wash down it. I was petrified. Each one of them was directly looking at me since I was the only one speaking when this happened. I explained to them what I saw. The friend went silent, and she said that an uncle of hers saw something similar not long prior. But she was laying on the couch and her uncle saw a dark shadow just hovering over her. Once I calmed down, I realized 3 things. The shadow felt as if it was feeding off my friend's energy, hence why I call them leeches. And my friend's extremely negative attitude was fueled by this shadow thing. The shadow was scared that I could see it, was surprised, ran for its life away from me. Have you ever been able to jump realities while lucid dreaming? In 2006-2007, I made a huge change in my life. One of those things, those pivotal decisions that create a shift in reality. I lived in Italy where I was born. I dumped my boyfriend of 8 years. I met my now husband, which I married a year later. I moved to the US. I had 2 kids. And while living my whole life until then, 31 years, with the certainty I didn't want kids ever. Around 2015 and 16, I had the most crazy lucid dream I'd ever had in my life. At that point in this reality, I had 2 little kids. I was overweight, still dealing with a losing baby fat thing, and I had copper brown hair, about the top of my shoulder length. Changed my fashion from Black Widow to hippie, happy-go-lucky spiritualist chick. In the dream, I was in this house which I couldn't recognize. Literally, in the dream, I told myself, "The hell am I?" I looked around, and there were a bunch of people partying, eating snacks, smoking pot, drinking beer and wine. I recognized the infamous ex and a friend of ours with his girlfriend, not the others. I kept looking around, and I found a large mirror hanging on a wall. I went to it, and I saw my own reflection on it. Yup, this was me, but as skinny as I was when I broke up with them pre-children. Long, dark black blue hair. My old black wing eye makeup and dark cherry lips, dressed in black. I was not seeing the dream with my own eyes, but I was there. I felt trapped inside my body, which wasn't my body. Somewhere with people I knew, but not really. And I thought, this is not my life. I have 2 kids and I'm married. I realized in the dream that I went somewhere else. And this wasn't a dream, really. This place was real. It existed somewhere. Those people, those laughs, I could hear them loud. The clinking of the glasses was very real. The sunlight on my skin felt warm. The bright room was blinding my eyes. Mind me, all this was happening while I was sleeping. This was the first and last time I ever saw myself in a dream, in the reflection of a mirror. Through my own eyes. Usually I either see but don't have a body, or it's like I'm watching a movie of myself, as a spectator of my own body interacting with the dream. What I see and me lucid dreaming are 2 different entities. In this dream, it was me. I was inside that version of me. I woke up from it feeling incredibly uneasy. I run to check on my kids to make sure that they were there. When I realized I was back to my reality, I had this huge sense of relief, because the other alternate reality I saw was ugly. I felt how the me felt, and it wasn't pretty at all. I'm convinced I did astral projection of some sort, and I entered an alternate reality, seeing how things would have been if I didn't leave my Italian ex. The shadows. My son is 9 years old, and he's always been sensitive to energies and spirits. He's able to see how energy changes color, too. This past year, we're struggling with these shadows. When I ask him to describe them to me, he said that they're small. They move incredibly fast in every direction. They do not interact with them. He stated that it's like they can see me, but I can see them. They can't see me, actually. They feel frustrated. Now, I myself have about all the clues, more or less, some stronger than others. I have like 100% accurate radar for creepy, dangerous, or annoying energy. Whatever it is, simply pissed off a spirit or something way lower on the scale. I can't sense those shadows. I don't feel my radar going crazy, at least, but my son is really scared of them. He says there's so many. For the past few months, we have a long ritual before bedtime. First, I set a UV lamp in his room. The UV light doesn't allow, let me paraphrase. UV lights don't allow a safe energetic vibration for ghosts to manifest. We do the energy bubble, quote unquote. It's a grounding and protection exercise I do, where I breathe in and out and dipping into the universe life force. I call in the flow from the source and I let it pass through my body and I create a shield all around the house. Fun fact, I change often the energy I call in, whatever's needed really. Healing is green, protection blue, comfort purple. My son 9 times out of 10 tells me the right color I produced. Second step is the sigil of protection that we make on his third eye using an oil made with Solomon seal root, which, quote unquote, seals off all evil. The same sigil I reproduced in a magnet I handmade and he stuck right above his head. He had a bunk bed. Third, I got him a St. Benedict medal, which he rubs every night before going to sleep. Patron protector against evil, used in Catholic exorcism too. Sometimes, the shadows are so prominent that all this is not enough and I have to use my own energy to blast them. This is a last resource though, because it's depleting for me. After I use my own energy, he says, a lot of orbs appear in place of the shadows. Have any of you ever seen or heard of the shadows as he's describing them? Note, I'm able to not only feel but also see with my own eyes the shadow people. This house is shielded in ways you cannot even fathom. I'm guessing they mean fathom. I'm a holistic healer, a crystal healer, a Reiki healer, an earth witch, and I dab in pranic healing. Never heard that term. Pranic, I believe. Pranic, okay. I never before heard of the shadows that he mentioned. Be warned that I never taught my son any of all of this. Just recently I taught him the breathing exercises to calm his anxiety with the strange stuff happening to him. And of course the ritual we do nightly and why. But I keep both my kids well separated from my spiritual activities. My most prominent theory? Dimensions. Since he also sees orbs, which are manifestations of spirits of different nature, my best guess is that these shadows might be either remnants of a lower dimension or visible through the veil of presences from another reality. But my guess is as right as any of yours could be, huh? Excuse the writing on that one. I'm reading it as is, best I can. Moving on. Missing cattle and the strangest experience of my life. My husband and I live on a farm of about 100 acres and raise cattle. It's a family farm. My dad grew up here and my grandpa lived and worked this land until the day that he died. I'm familiar with every inch and have never felt scared walking the farm or the surrounding land. A few months ago, one of our cattle disappeared. She had a calf, and if you're unfamiliar with cattle, it's pretty strange for a cow to leave her calf, depending on the cow, of course. Our farm is in the Appalachian foothills in Kentucky, so there are quite a few hollers. We figured that the cow went down into a holler, died in the brush somewhere, or got into a neighbor's field. My husband looked and looked but never found her. Never found a body, never found any evidence of that cow. The day she went missing, there were some strange spots in the grass of the field, where it was laid down like something had smushed it, and oddly enough, 2 vehicles ran out of gas right near those weird spots. Thought it was a weird, spooky coincidence. Kind of funny. Ooh, supernatural. Until today. Today, my favorite cow went missing. My husband, sister, and I spent approximately 5 hours searching for this cow. We combed every inch of fields. We searched the hollers. We checked the neighbors' fields. No sign of her. She also had a calf and was a notoriously good mama, and the calf is still here. I figured she got out into the neighboring cornfield, or perhaps somebody stole her, which would have been weird because she was an older cow, and was also the only missing cow. Until I experienced the strangest thing that makes me think maybe it is supernatural. My sister and I were out looking for the missing cow around 6:37 p.m., and between 2 of our fields, there's a piece of land that we don't own that juts in between 2 of the fields that we do own. It's mostly wooded and bordered with a barbed wire fence. I knew our cows sometimes crossed over, so I wanted to search there. My sister and I are both in our late 20s and grew up running wild in the woods. We hunted, climbed waterfalls, dodged snakes, pulled tricks off ourselves. Nothing scared us then, and nothing scares us now. I crossed over the barbed wire to go look for the cow, and my sister stopped, which is weird. She's my younger sister and always follows me. I was teasing her, calling her a chicken and telling her that I'd be there before that and that I wouldn't take her anywhere dangerous and that she knows that. She kept stalling, and I finally got short with her and yelled at her to come on. She crossed the barbed wire but kept stopping. Finally, she caught up with me, but as I walked further into the woods, I got a bad feeling. The only way I can describe it is dark. My sister also kept saying that she couldn't hear me, even though I was talking loudly and was only 2 feet away from her at the most. I finally stopped, turned around, and we booked it out of there. Once we crossed back over the barbed wire, the bad feeling went away. My sister went home a couple hours later because she was unusually tired. I texted her and asked her if what she thought about the woods was feeling off. She says that she was terrified the entire time. I'm going to quote her text beneath here. It was like we were going down a dark path to nowhere. I like to explore, but it didn't feel right. It gives me chills and almost makes me cry thinking about it, so I just told myself I was psyching myself out. It was right when we passed the fence, like we were somewhere we shouldn't have been. I was actually scared. I trust you and everything, of course, but the feeling I got standing and looking into the woods was just telling me not to go, not to cross the fence. The farther we went, it just got worse. Like a dark shadow or something screaming at my insides, telling me to go back. Afterwards, I got a heavy feeling making me so tired. And this all happened this evening. We never found the cow or any sign of her. I also have this horrible lingering feeling from being in those woods. I feel dread when I think about it. I'm exhausted and I'm jumpy. I wanted to recount the story somewhere so I wouldn't forget the details, and to see if anybody had any similar experiences or thoughts on what might be happening, supernatural or otherwise. I can tell you I've never felt anything like that in my entire life. My sister's never scared, which scared me even more. My daughter's gifts. I always knew that my little Leah was different. She always knew how people felt and what they were trying to say without them saying anything. She's been in touch with the energy of everything around her for so long that after a while I just grew used to it. But then one day her father passed away. She was only 4 at that time, and she was sleeping when I got the news, so I didn't tell her anything. I didn't even say anything until the week was done so that my oldest had a weekend to think before going back to school. So for days, I didn't say a thing. Even then, all my girls that were too small to understand death, I just said he'd gotten into an accident. The day of his funeral, my daughter gave me a drawing to give her father since she knew I was going to see him tomorrow. He said, "Of course, I'll be back after seeing Papa." We're a bilingual family, and she and I know. Then she says how much pain he was in. I was shocked and asked what she meant. She completely described all the damage his body got. He died in a skidoo accident. She said how his tibia broke, his back broke, he smashed his head, his glasses exploded in his face, his lips were bleeding, and he was coughing up blood. There could be more, but that's what I remember. I was shocked, and I said, "I don't think it was that bad." Months later, I got the coroner's report, and she was dead on, every little detail she got. I started to cry. Did my daughter see what happened? Did her father visit her? How could this 4-year-old know so much? Was someone in her body? Still to this day, this story gives me the creeps, and I'll never forget the day that she was able to say everything with a smile on her face. I think my deceased father is still here. My dad was a great dude. He was the heart and soul of our family. He was diagnosed with cancer in 2009 and passed away a few days before Christmas of 2018. He rarely missed a day of work throughout the many surgeries, chemo, and radiation. Anyway, I've struggled with addiction my entire life. Started with pills and such and ended up full-blown IV heroin cocaine addict. My dad never gave up on me and was hell-bent on straightening me up. A few months prior to his death, I went off the deep end again and lost my job and got myself in a bad way. When I came home and saw the shape he was in, it broke my heart because I knew he wasn't going to be here much longer. I immediately checked myself into detox, Halloween 2018. I've been sober since. Now on to my story. My mom and I are living in the house that he actually passed away in. For the first year or more, nothing happened. But the last year or so, there's been some really strange occurrences. And these occurrences, anybody who knew my dad would attribute to him. At first, it was just the televisions cutting off and on, stuff that can be easily written off. My mom and I even started jokingly saying, "Cut it out, Dad," every time something happened. Then it was his alarm clock which made us really give it a second thought, due to the fact that he was the most organized and punctual man you'd ever meet. He was an hour early to everything. Also, the blinds in our back door are open every morning, even though we keep them closed, or else our other dog will stay there looking in and whimper all night. Every day I tell my mom to quit opening the blinds and shut them, and every morning they're open again. My dad used to do the same. When my sister and I were in high school, my dad would come into our rooms every morning on weekends and open our blinds to make us get up. Finally, once we started to acknowledge the things happening, a timer that my dad used to teach my niece how long to brush her teeth every night when she was a child, she'll be 14 in May, went off in the middle of the night. It had been at least 6 or 7 years since it had been used, and took us forever to find it. It had been set to 10 minutes and was powered by a single AAA battery. It's not a scary thing, it's actually kind of comforting. It's just the way things are befitting of Dad so much. My sister and Mom always say if anybody could have figured out a way to hang around and make sure I act right, it's Dad. Brings me some kind of solace in the fact that maybe he can see that I've gotten my shit together a little bit, and this is his way of acknowledging it. There have been many other instances in the past few months, and researching, I read that when a lot of emotion in a room where somebody passes, it can cause a spirit to linger. When my dad passed, there were probably 40 family members all gathered when he took his last breath. Anyway, just found this sub and wanted to share. I had a cool poltergeist experience in a Florida resort condo. I was in freshman year of high school when one of my friends asked if I wanted to go to Florida with him and his family. Well, we went, and the first half of the day was fine at the resort, until me and my friend went back to the condo. So, quick view of the condo. The front door was at the front left corner of the condo, and to the condo from the inside of the condo, and to the right of the door was the kitchen and mine and my friend's room. In front of the kitchen and the door was the living room, on the same side my room is on the condo, but the other end is my friend's mom's and little brother's room. Now into the paranormal stuff. I was sitting on my bed facing the door looking into the living room. I saw a male, teen or early 20s in red swim trunks. I remember he was white and he had short blonde hair. He walked from the kitchen area to my mom's room. I was shocked but kind of felt fun seeing a ghost. Later that night before bed, me and my friend witnessed some stuff get dragged. A pair of earbuds that was on the center drawer by my bed, and a pillow got pushed from the center of my friend's bed onto the floor. The next morning, we woke up to every drawer in my room and the bathroom inside my room, forgot to mention that, and in the kitchen being pulled open, including the bathroom door, the closet door, and our room door, which was locked. Later that night, or the night after, my friend went to ask his mom a question in her room, and when we walked by, he saw a black human-shaped lump on the couch. Thought it was his brother, so he kept walking. When he went to his mom's room, he found out his brother was taking a shower in her bathroom. He was freaked out for 30 or so minutes and wouldn't tell me what he saw, but told after a while. I don't remember anything else really happening after that. It was a fun ride hanging out with that ghost. I have a bunch of other paranormal stories that are as wild as that one. An anecdote in my grandmother's old house. This happened when I was approximately 9 years old. I was at my grandmother's house along with her and my cousin. Just the three of us, there was no one else. I was laying down in the same room as my cousin, but we slept in separate beds. My grandmother was sleeping in her own bedroom, and I was approximately up at midnight for some strange reason. Couldn't fall asleep, and my cousin was already asleep. In that, I hear the singing of a woman in the living room. She also appeared to be wearing a white dress. I didn't see her face, and I only saw her partially. After a few seconds, she disappeared, and the bathroom light, which was next to our room, suddenly turned on and then turned off. My cousin woke up suddenly, and he told me that he listened to her too. We were in shock until we decided to leave our room to see what was happening. I went to my grandmother's room, and she seemed to be completely asleep, in her pajamas. She didn't seem to have gotten up. My cousin went to check the bathroom and said that there was nothing. We also checked the living room and the kitchen, and there was nothing and no one. The strangest thing of all is that this woman had the same tone of voice as my grandmother. But as I mentioned earlier, my grandmother was sleeping in her room and didn't seem to have gotten up. She also has very heavy sleep, and it's extremely rare for her to get up after midnight. Also, as far as I remember, she didn't have any white dresses. For starters, she never even wears dresses. My cousin and I were very surprised by this. We decided to go to sleep, though. Next morning, we didn't say anything to my grandmother, mainly so we didn't scare her, since she lived alone back then. However, we seriously asked if she had gotten up at midnight. She said no, she was deeply asleep, as she put it. With the passage of time, and until now, I'm currently 20 years old, I keep thinking about it. This is the only unusual experience that's happened to me, for now. Why do the lights turn themselves on? Pictures fall off walls, dishes rattle in the drying rack every day at my house. I live with my parents and older brother. I get up for the day around 12 or 1 a.m. every day. No one else gets up until 7 at the earliest, usually later. Since no one else is up, I'm very careful about being quiet and turning lights off, to the point that I double and triple check that yes, I physically flipped the switch. The light went off, no more light. This occurs in almost every room, but mainly our small hallway bathroom. I go in, turn the light off, make damn sure it's off, no other lights on in the house either, and I'll walk back out, and less than 5 minutes later the bathroom light's on. Every morning, usually multiple times. Same deal with pictures either swinging or falling off the wall. No one is ever even awake besides me, and nowhere near the pictures. Same with the dishes in our drying rack. My house is small, but I'll be standing in my living room roughly 12 feet away from the dish rack, and it just rattles super loud. Not a little bit, I'm talking a ton of noise and commotion and movement. Occasionally a spoon or fork will eventually fall out, from the force of the rattling, that is. These occurrences usually aren't connected to 3 a.m., the witching hour or the dead time or whatever. They happen then too, but it's not exclusive to 3 a.m. For a little background, the house was built in, I believe, 1984. I'm pretty sure nobody's died in it. We also have one room that freaks all of us out, just super unsettling to be in there, like you're being watched or something. And none of any animals that we've ever owned have ever gone in there. They refuse and freak out if you try to carry them in. We pretty much just don't go in there. It's my dad's office now. But until he recently had to work from home due to COVID, nobody ever really went in there. Like, we each have our own bedroom, the living room and kitchen are all connected, just a big open space. If anybody has any suggestions about what might be causing these occurrences, or has had similar experiences, please let me know. I've lived in this house 17 years, and this has always happened, but it's happening much more frequently and much more intensely lately. I'm wondering why that is. Chukshin, mythical Korean toilet ghost. Chukshin was believed to appear as a young virgin with 150 centimeter long hair. The goddess, infuriated at her exile to the outhouse by the supreme deity Xiongjuang, and kitchen goddess Joang Shin. They were said to spend time by counting all her hair. The goddess was believed to appear in the 3 days containing the number 6. Koreans avoided the outhouse in these 3 days in order to not accidentally provoke her rage. Thus, Koreans held jizas, or rituals, to her in the 6th, 16th, and 26th days in the lunar calendar, or when a shoe or a child fell into the pit toilet. Jizas were also done for her when a pig contracted disease or died, when a prophecy warned of the anger of the goddess, or when the outhouse was built. In the jizas dedicated to the Chukshin, Koreans put all ingredients possible inside the chok, which was called the chongchok, meaning dong rice cake. The chongchok was then served to the goddess. Non-glutinous rice was also served. She was regarded to be the most dangerous of the Gashin. She was believed to despise children, possibly because of her downfall by the child Noctisaijin, see below, and topple them into the pit toilet. When children fell in the pit, it was believed that they would die before reaching maturity, unless a jesa was done to appease the goddess. If anyone entered the outhouse without coughing 3 times, Chukshin would be believed to use her long hair to attack the intruder. When the hair of Chukshin touched the skin of the intruder's skin grew sick and died, along with the person apparently. Even a mudang or shaman could not appease the goddess if she attacked a person with her hair. She was believed to embody a strip of cloth or white paper on the outhouse ceiling. She was also believed to be the deity of illegal punishment, following the orders of the house deity Xiong Jung-shin. No gut or shamanistic rituals were held to dedicate Xiong-shin, unlike the many guts and Bon Pulis biographies of deities dedicated to other Gishin. This was because it was believed that Xiong-shin was an evil and malevolent deity, unlike the other Gishin. Because of the conflict of Joang-shin and Chuk-shin, Simonjon Bonpuli, in Korean, it was taboo to bring anyone from the outhouse into the kitchen and vice versa. Bear with me, I am obviously not Korean. My great-granda lets me know that she was leaving us. Let me start off by saying that this happened when I was 13 years old. I'm 30 now. My great-grandma was in the beginning stages of Alzheimer's when she came to live with my grandma, her biological daughter, and her son-in-law, my grandpa. I'm very close with both my grandpa and my grandma, and was very close with my great-grandma. I remember being excited when I found that she was coming to live with my grandparents, but I didn't fully understand the reason why. I would see her most every day, and we would be talking and she would forget who I was or would forget to speak English and start speaking to me in Spanish, which I didn't understand. This is when I was told what was going on in truth. Fast forward a few months and we were at a diner table. Great-grandma was eating her food, as was everybody else, and out of nowhere she says, "I love you, baby, so much. I'm really gonna miss you when I leave." Of course, we all told her not to say such things, and that she was gonna be all right. Not long after that, I stayed up the night at my grandparents' house. My cousin and myself slept in one room, my grandparents in another, and great-grandma in the room across from ours. That night I had a dream or a vision, I don't know, but I know it was great-grandma letting me know that she was leaving us. I was looking through the eyes of my grandma, who was looking at me, leaning over the bed with my head on great-grandma's chest to see if she was breathing. I saw myself lean over the bed while I was looking through my grandma's eyes, standing in the doorway. That's when I woke up to my grandma shaking me, frantically saying, "I think Grandmama's dead." I shot out of the bed and ran into the room to see her lifeless. And just like I saw in my dream and vision, I leaned over the bed, put my head on her chest to listen for any signs of breathing. When I looked over at the doorway, Grandma was standing in the exact location where I was looking through her eyes, looking at me. I don't know why or how I saw this. I feel as if maybe this may have happened because we all had this strong connection. My great-grandma, grandma, and myself. Or because she wanted to let me know that she was going. I'm not sure. Either way, it still kind of haunts me, and I miss her terribly. There's times when I'll randomly smell her perfume, which is comforting, and I feel like she's around me. I still don't know what it was. This experience happened about 6 years ago. I was dog sitting for a family friend of my then girlfriend's family for some extra money. I would go over to their house once in the morning and once in the evening to feed the dog and walk around the backyard on a leash to do its business. It was a smaller dog, one of those that seemed to overcompensate for its size by trying to be big, bad, and scary, barking at everything with no fear. I was doing this for a solid week. On the second to last night I was over there, I was walking the dog in the backyard as usual. It was fairly dark by that time. Not pitch black, but dark enough that you couldn't comfortably walk around without a light. The moon was out, so that helped a bit, but I also had my phone's flashlight on. The backyard wasn't fenced, hence the leash. It was probably a good 15 feet or so of flat ground before it became thick, tall, grassy weed-type foliage. Behind that was just woods. The dog always took a long time sniffing around every goddamn weed, rock, what have you. Then it suddenly froze, as if too scared to move a muscle. At the same time, I heard a rustling maybe 20 feet ahead of me and to my right. I shined my phone's flashlight over in the direction, but it was just not helpful. The rustling grew louder, but it didn't sound like it was getting closer to me. Finally, I started seeing the tall grassy foliage start to move, and then I saw something emerge from it. Its size was similar to that of an adult black bear, but it was covered in skin that was whitish in color. It wasn't filled out or bulbous like a bear, but seemed rather lean instead. Imagine a large white gorilla, but with no hair, hunched down on its front arms and legs. It didn't make any grunting or growling noises. And somehow it looked like it was moving in slow motion. The dog, which would normally bark at anything, started to whimper. At this point, my eyes had started adjusting to the dim light, and I saw the thing turn its head towards me. I don't believe it had a face. I ran back to the house with that dog so fast I would have beaten Usain Bolt. The next day I went out with an actual flashlight, but nothing out of the ordinary happened. Except for a flash thunderstorm and neighbor putting a hole in my wall. Just sleep paralysis or an evil spirit? First of all, let me start off by saying I usually don't believe in evil spirits or being haunted by one. However, I absolutely love the subreddit, and I've had such creepy encounters in my sleep that I felt like this is the right place to share them. The past couple of years, 1 or 2 years, I haven't had that good an experience with sleep. I visited a small town in Italy with 2 of my best friends, who happened to be a couple this past summer. Of course, they slept in a double bed, while I slept on a convertible sofa in another room. Our accommodation was, to our surprise, located on top of a mountain, far, far away from the town that we had initially wanted to stay in. I'd say about a 15-20 minute bus ride, and the bus only drove 3 times a day. That was a huge disappointment, but not really part of the story. Since we were located on top of this mountain, right along the main road, where vehicles passed very seldomly, I tended to feel uneasy during the nighttime, especially since I slept alone and we rented a holiday apartment, not a hotel with many other people or something of that sort. The first night only got a little bit of sleep, also of poor quality, but that was only because the sofa was a bit uncomfortable. On the second night, however, I woke up once in the middle of the night only to see a tall and slim outline of a person standing right at the foot of my bed, staring at me. Since I was so flustered and still tired, I didn't really process what was happening. I pulled up my blanket over my head and continued sleeping. The next morning I realized what happened. I was petrified. I told my 2 friends at the breakfast table, and of course they called bullshit. I insisted that I knew what I saw, and I persuaded them to let me sleep in their bed for the next night, which was no problem since their bed was huge. Next night rolls around, and my best friend's boyfriend falls asleep relatively quick. However, my bestie and I were still up for 10 to 20 minutes, talking and whispering, trying not to wake our boyfriend up. Then we hear what sounds like somebody putting keys in the front door and entering the hallway. We both were convinced that there was a person in our apartment, walking around the kitchen and living room, where my sofa was located. We both froze and literally thought we were going to die that night. Since I've always had sketchy vibes ever since we first arrived, we woke up to the third party only for him to tell us to go back to sleep, which he did. Next morning, it turns out that there's another family staying in the apartment right beneath us, and a possible explanation would be that they entered their apartment yesterday night, but the both of us genuinely believed that there was somebody in our apartment casually walking around. On another not-so-pleasant occasion, I went to sleep normally in my bed a few months ago, when I suddenly woke up in the middle of the night, only to find that I couldn't move my body. My limbs were numb, I couldn't turn my head, I couldn't speak. I felt completely paralyzed. I've had sleep paralysis before, so I know that this was just another night of bad sleep. However, this time was different. I saw my dad turning a light and walking around the hallways, passing my room, which isn't unusual, probably to get a glass of water or go to the toilet. I desperately and unsuccessfully tried calling out for him, but of course nothing but a whisper came out of his mouth. In that moment, I felt so helpless. My dad got what he needed, turned off the light and went back to bed. And in the moment he switched off the light, I saw a dark and tiny creature and blob of shadow sitting on my desktop chair and staring at me. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it wanted from me. All of a sudden, this shadow jumps up, runs right up to me on the side of my bed, then jumps onto my bed, only to repeatedly hop from one side of my pillow to the other. I felt so scared and terrorized in that moment, but I guess that terror finally woke me up and I could move again. The shadow was gone. I turned on the light and had to walk around my room for a few minutes just to return to reality and collect myself. I've had many similar events to this one, but none were as horrible. After that night, I was afraid to go to bed for a couple of weeks. My dying mom makes a call to my brother. On December 25th, 2021, my mom entered the stage of life called active dying. Her skin was cold, her breathing labored. It reminded me of a fish out of water, and she was completely unresponsive. My family and I spent our last hours with her alive. My father called hospice to bring in an oxygen machine. We went to bed around 1 a.m. During that time we spent in the living room, these walkie-talkies that we have started going off as if somebody pressed buttons on the other line. No speaking, just the static sound. My dad brought out these weeks prior so my mom could use them if she needed him at night, since she slept in the living room and my dad was sleeping in their bedroom. Anyways, the walkie-talkies were making these noises randomly in the middle of the night. I won't chalk it up to being paranormal, even if it didn't make any sense that they would go off at the time. The creepy thing happens a few days later. My dad's going through my mom's phone to tell people who were texting her what had happened, stuff like that. He comes across a call to my brother made at 1:25 a.m. on the 26th, right after we'd gone to sleep. She was in an unresponsive state. She could not have called anyone. We don't think she even had her phone near her while she was dying. It was probably in her purse since she had just driven home from a trip. To do that, she'd have to get up to find her phone when she could hardly breathe, let alone walk. And do it quiet enough to not wake up my dad, who was sleeping on the couch. I doubt that my dad could have slept through her doing that, since he would have just gone to sleep. He hadn't been sleeping well for that week because any noise she would make, he would get up to make sure she was okay. I doubt that night it would have been any different. Also, it would make sense that if she were to call anyone, it would maybe be my brother, since my phone's broken and my sister doesn't use hers. So either she got up while she was dying, made a phone call to my brother, or she was already dead when she made it. Either situation freaks me out when I think about it. Aside from wondering how this happened, I also wonder what would happen if my brother had answered the call. One of my 2 ghost experiences. So as a kid, and just generally growing up in that house until moving away when I was in middle school, I did occasionally from time to time hear voices, where I'd hear the voices varied from the house itself to the garage that was next to the house. I didn't really think much of it until I brought this up to my sister. She told me that she once saw a spirit in the house. She remembers once seeing a reflection of someone in my older brother's bedroom window. This window was on the second floor, so we know for sure that it wasn't just some guy in the distance. She described this reflection as a bearded man in his mid-30s. He had a little bit of a gut, but wasn't like he was obese. He just seemed a little fat, and his outfit seemed fairly normal. She told me he wore a flannel shirt with jeans, so this spirit just looked like a lumberjack. So after swapping these stories, we decided to go to our parents about this, and let's just say they had something to say about it. So when my parents bought that house, it really needed to be worked on and repaired because the people that used to own it haven't actually lived or just looked after it in a very long time. So they actually worked on repairing the house for the first year that they got it. My parents weren't all on their own when they were working on the house. They had a friend that was the exact physical description. And when we asked what happened to this guy, my parents told both of us that he actually hung himself in the garage when they were close to being finished with fixing the house. My other ghost story that I actually experienced. So our story starts in Maine, in a neighborhood reasonably close to Portland. I was up there to visit family pretty much, and the house in question belonged to one of my aunts, and I was with my aunt from Boston that wanted to drive up to visit them too. We showed up at the house, and I was just told that the house was already pretty old when my other aunt's family moved in. And that's the most I know about the history of the house. I might ask later because it sounds interesting. So we come in, settle down in the guest rooms, and we all start talking about the trip so far. And I make a joke about my outfit saying, "Oh yeah, I look like a Salem lesbian." We all have a laugh, and I soon forget about the comment. We jumped that night, and just occasionally throughout the night I hear scratching on the door. I wasn't that concerned yet, mainly because my aunt's family had a dog and a cat. But most of the time when I got up to let them in, the hallway was empty. Now at first, I wasn't worried. I was used to hearing scratches before the trip because I just have a generally needy cat. So to clear my mind before bed, I decided to take a shower. Though when I got out of the shower and I settled in, I heard my cousin walk to the bathroom and loudly say, "Ah, damn, forgot to turn off the light." And from that moment, I knew something was up. Next night, pretty normal, though I did still keep hearing the scratching. So I decided to go down the stairs to grab a glass of water. But as soon as I was going to head back into the room, I heard a very clear yet feminine, "You're not allowed to do that," in my ear. And after a moment of confusion, I was kind of just happy I was leaving the next day. A strange story from my childhood. Me and my sister were in our room playing when my parents were in the TV room. Father was watching TV and Mom was in the kitchen. It was fine when suddenly my sister saw a white translucent being with a beard and a grin on his face leaving our bathroom, which was inside our room, and moving to the TV lounge. My sister called me as I was facing backwards to the bathroom. I didn't clearly see the whole figure, just the white part of clothing at the brink of our door, so I didn't completely believe her. After 5 or 10 minutes, my father started choking very badly, and the creature returned to our room this time, and I'd left the room earlier, but my sister was there. The creature this time made a very evil, loud laughter that I heard, and my sister then ran out of the room after hearing that. My father, after this laughter, after choking badly, fainted, and Mom was outside calling the ambulance on the phone. It's been years. Everything is fine now. My parents are still unaware of any creature or a sound. But if only it was me or my sister alone, I could call it as some imagination, but we both at a different place heard it and saw it, although I just saw part of the creature's clothes. We changed our room after that and never used the bathroom. I did use it sometimes in daylight, but nothing happened. After we left home, the room and bathroom weren't in use, just during monthly cleaning. One day, my mother told us that while they opened the room, there were hundreds of lizards on the walls, so many that the wall was barely visible, and all in the blink of an AM, I rushed in a small hole outside like there was nothing before. I do not understand that last sentence. Moving on. Things I can't explain. While growing up, there were things that I'd seen that could be in a horror movie. In elementary school, my friends and myself saw a dead cat. It looked like a dog got a hold of it, so we buried it in the backyard. The next day, what did we see? Same cat in a ravaged-looking state, walking by the gate, and it stared menacingly before disappearing, never to be seen again. Could be a coincidence or mistaken identity, so let me explain the other occurrences. There was a door in the dining room that I repeat, always, was just closed properly, but it always opened by itself. You could slam the door, check the door, lock the door, but it was always open as if somebody slowly entered the room. In high school, I recalled using the desktop in the front room reading after I learned about Nostradamus. After doing so, I showed my older brother and cousin. My brother sat in front of the monitor while my cousin and I were on the side. And suddenly, as we reached the part where it said that his use of the occult led him to predicting his soul would go to hell, paraphrasing what I'm seeing here, there was a black disembodied arm that lay rest on the table. And in shock, my cousin and myself said, "Did you see that?" Then without initially, at the same time, we said the arm and decided to close the website. This is confusing. Now, as we get deeper into things that happened, there was a friend of my brother who needed a place to stay, so she was invited in for a while. Ironically, the same things I just typed I said to her. She said that in school, on the island, they played a Ouija board and the participants saw a witch who was haunting them. Thought nothing of it and felt that she was just telling a tall tale, but strange things started happening. I can't say if it was the house I lived in or maybe something that was up with me, but when she came, it was as if her energy I could feel. It started with me hearing voices similar to relatives who in fact was not there at 3 a.m. in the morning, to seeing more things like shadow figures and evil spirits. I often told people, if I see a spirit, it has a slight white while being translucent, but I always saw a full figure with details. Then suddenly I'm being bothered by a presence when I'm by myself. It was like a deep growling, like some sort of beast in my ear, and I always have to break free, and it leads to insomnia. My sister and myself even saw while my mother was in the kitchen cooking a large thing, and I'll do my best to describe it. You can describe it, but I don't know if I understand what you're saying. It was huge, at least 6 foot, walked on hooves, bulky wax-looking skin and a face with hair that reminded me of the predator. It got really bad to the point where I had to get prayed over and anointed with oil. That night, after the prayers as I lay in bed, the thing came to bother me, but it slammed up against a barrier that was solid white, and I found peace. For a while, that is. I apologize, no disrespect, it's just written very crazily. Faceless Man. Nearly 5 years ago, when I was 16, my dad and I went on vacation around Christmas to Boulder, Colorado. We rented this little house pretty far out of town in the mountains. It was located in this sort of ravine or meadow, in between 2 tall, steep mountains, and had a medium-sized stream running right in front of it. It seemed like a really neat house when we were just looking online at it. because one side was completely made of grass and was isolated in the forest. Well, the first night came and everything still seemed all right. I had brought my little dog along, and of course he needed to pee in the middle of the night. I was kind of spooked at the idea of going outside at 1 a.m., but more because I was afraid of bears or cougars or whatever. I tried to wake my dad up, but he had been taking some sleeping pill and literally refused to wake up. So I put on my coat and everything and went outside with my dog. I had a high-powered flashlight, and as I was walking out of the yard, sort of scanning the light along the edge of the valley, I saw something across the creek that I wasn't expecting. There was a man standing out there. I froze for a minute. Then, like a total idiot, I yelled, "Who's there?" I really just thought it may have been, I don't know, in the moment I thought it was like a night ice fisherman. I didn't get scared until he didn't answer, and by then I started to notice some weird things about him. It was freezing, like probably -10 Fahrenheit at least, but this man wasn't wearing a coat. It was like I couldn't see any details about him, almost like he was a solid shadow. Even though I was close enough and the light was bright enough to see the trees behind him in detail, I was shining this super bright light right into his face, but he wasn't recoiling whatsoever or putting his hands to cover his eyes or anything. Also, the longer I looked at him, the weirder he seemed. He didn't seem to be moving at all, like not even shifting his shoulders to breathe or anything. He looked to be average height and build, but the other weird thing, first I thought he was wearing a face mask, like the kind of people wear when they go skiing, but this mask covered his entire head, as if the entire face was one smooth black surface. He was certainly facing me, though. I was not looking at him from the back. The longer I stood there, the more scared I got until I sprinted back inside, yanking my little dog behind me. I could still clearly see him through the glass side of the house, and I was very alarmed to see that he had swiveled. He had sort of smoothly tracked my movement into the house, but it didn't seem like he had moved his feet or anything. I ran upstairs and tried again to wake up my dad. I told him that there was a man standing outside the house. He sort of shuffled over to the window, saw him, but said it was probably a druggie and went back to sleep. I probably should have called 911, but my dad didn't seem concerned. I thought he would get mad if I caused a stir about it, so I didn't do anything. I did watch the man, though, all night. The man stood in the exact same place for hours, never moving, not even seeming to breathe. He didn't seem fazed whatsoever by the extreme temperature. He just seemed to stare right at me, and I stared back. At one point I looked away, and when I came back to the window, I was shocked to see that he was gone. An odd movement grabbed my attention, though. This is the bit that I find the hardest to describe or explain. He seemed to be glitching. He was behind a big tree, so I couldn't really make out a lot. But over and over, I kept seeing his arm and leg come out from behind the tree, then smoothly slide back to a normal standing position. It really looked like a video game character glitching, but in real life. At some point I dozed off, and when the sun came up, he had disappeared. It was such a bizarre experience, I wasn't sure if it was real. It just didn't seem like the quintessential ghost or Slender Man or whatever. So I don't know what to really make of it. My dad reconfirmed, though, the next day that he'd definitely seen the man, so at least wasn't hallucinating. I also walked across the bridge to where the man was standing, in the day, of course, and there were not any footprints or any other confirming evidence that the man was there at all. It continues to be one of the most significant paranormal experiences I've ever had. I did try to take photos during the event as well. I also photographed the entire property. When I got home, the SIM card was corrupted, quote-unquote, and all the footage was lost. I don't know if that was just bad luck or part of the experience. But I'd never had a problem with my camera before and never had a single problem like that since. Additionally, the house that we rented has been taken down from every single house renting website, so I can't find any trace of it, even when I reverse searched the single image of the house that I'd saved on my computer before the trip. Haunted bathroom. I've lived in the same house since I was 4, and I'm currently 20. The bathroom adjacent to my bedroom is the kids' bathroom and appears to have been since the house was built in the 1940s. It's also funny because when we moved in, we remodeled some parts of the house, including the bathroom. It's all white, with white tile and granite and bright lighting, which doesn't really seem to fit the fact that a ghost haunts it. The first time I ever experienced anything really scary in that bathroom was when I was around 8. I was taking a bath and I was alone. I was just chilling, reading a book or whatever, when I heard a girl's voice inside the bathtub. Like it sounded like it came from directly above me, as if the ghost was hovering a few inches above me in the bath. It said, "Hello," several times, and I was terrified. First, I was frozen. Then I absolutely high-tailed it out of there. After that, I hated the bathroom near my room. I refused to even enter it for at least a month and had to go all the way downstairs to the bathroom and shower and brush my teeth in the kitchen sink. Well, nothing much ever really happened for many years after that. It wasn't until I was much older, probably 13 or so, that things started happening there again. The next run-in with this ghost was by far the worst. I was alone at night. My mom was out on a date. It wasn't a big deal and I was used to it, so I wasn't already scared or freaked out. I was hanging out in my room and I had my dog sitting next to me. The door to my room was open. I wasn't paying attention, listening to music and playing a game or something, when my dog jumped up and looked at the door. I followed his gaze and saw a dark figure at the door. Was child height and appeared to be a little girl. She had black hair that was dripping wet and the rest of her face looked to be dark gray. She was peering around the corner of the door so that I could only see her head. As soon as I saw her, she ran down the hallway and stairs. I could hear her running. It didn't occur to me whatsoever that it was a ghost at the time. The fact that both the dog and I could see her, then I could hear her running down the hallway, made me think it was an intruder. I was so scared that it also didn't register that the intruder was a small girl. I just thought that there was somebody else in the house. It felt like lightning was coursing through my body. I ran into the bathroom and hid myself in a cabinet, then called the police. The police came and searched the entire house and had to come pull me out of the cabinet. But they said that they didn't find anything, and in fact, the house alarm was still on when they arrived, which meant that none of the doors or windows had been opened since my mom left. Not a week after this incident, another thing happened. I was standing in the bathroom washing my face. I got a strong feeling something was behind me, but I ignored it, thinking it was just because my eyes were closed. But out of nowhere, I was, almost like possessed. I lost consciousness for a moment. It was as if I were taken to a different place. It was like an empty black space with nothing anywhere. The floor was made of water and I was soaking wet. In the distance, there were these glowing purple lights. Then I heard a voice. It was the same voice that I heard in the bathtub years ago. But this time it was in my head, not out loud. It said my name, Lucy, over and over. Then I woke up. I was on the floor of the bathroom. It was so strange. It was like I'd been in some spiritual journey or something. I suddenly knew things about this ghost. I knew it was a child. I knew her name, like I knew instinctively that Lucy was her name. I knew that she died in that bathroom. And I knew that she was friendly but lonely, that she wanted me to know about her death. But didn't actually mean to scare me. I wasn't freaked out, really. It was more relieving to find out what all these events were, or that she wasn't an evil spirit or anything. I tried to run and tell my mom what had just happened, who, by the way, thought I was being crazy about the whole thing and was still angry that I messed up her date a week earlier by calling the police when nobody was actually in the house. But she definitely thought I was just acting like a loon. And I mean, who wouldn't think that? Since then, the bathroom is still 100% haunted,